I now reconvene the general session. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Danette Brown,
Here.
Catherine Williams Brown,
Here.
Jose Cardenas,
Here.
Gerald Cotton,
Here.
Juan Cruz,
Here.
Christopher Davis,
Present.
Michael Delatorre,
Present.
Anna Marie Francois, Makita Quino Shire,
Present.
Megan Gross,
Here.
Johanna Harwick,
Here.
Susan Aradia, Bonnie Clark,
Present.
Ira Litt,
Present.
Monica Martinez, Shireen Palvery,
Present.
David Simmons.
Here.
Kimberly Weiss Smith. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I now recess the general session and move to the Professional Practices Committee. I will chair the committee since Commissioner Hartwig is participating via Zoom. I now convene the Professional Practices Committee. The committee has one item today. Item 3A is the Division of Professional Practices Workload Report. Rachel Grizofi, excuse me, Rachel. Rachel Grizofi will present this item. Ms. Grizofi, will you please begin when you're ready?
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Updates on the Commission's Division of Professional Practices Workload are presented to the Commission to provide insight into the scope and level of work in the area of educator discipline. The report covers the period of August to October of 2023 in comparison to the same period last year. The Commission's dashboards report on 6 key measurements in line graph form, showing both current year numbers as well as prior year numbers for comparison purposes. The total cases are the number of cases within DPP, including cases in the intake unit, before the Committee of Credentials, pending before the Commission, and pending an administrative hearing. At the end of October, DPP's caseload decreased slightly and ended with 2,932. With the current increase in application submissions, the data is trending toward a steady increase of workload in DPP. Cases open are new cases open during the month from all sources, including criminal arrest notices, district reports, affidavits, and educators who self-report misconduct. In October, staff opened 288 cases, below the normal range of 400 to 500 cases opened each month. The initial review and formal review charts reflect the number of cases reviewed by the committee at its normal 3-day meeting each month. This 2-step review process is required by statute. The initial review cases totaled 88 in October. DPP does expect to reach and sustain the goal of 90 initial review cases per month for the second half of fiscal year 23-24. Cases closed is the number of matters closed by commission action, committee action, or closed by staff where the commission has given formal delegation. But I'm sorry, let me backtrack a minute. Has given formal delegation of authority, for example, single alcohol offenses that do not involve schools, minors, or publicity. In October, 357 cases were closed, which was slightly below the normal range of 400 to 500. AG cases refers to the cases in which an educator requests an administrative hearing to challenge the recommendation for discipline made by the committee. An administrative hearing is an evidentiary proceeding where an administrative law judge hears and rules on the evidence. The commission is represented in these hearings by the Office of the Attorney General. The number of cases where the AG is representing the commission is shown in the very last graph. The number of cases currently at the administrative hearing stage is 171. DPP is committed to work that is critical to public service and the commission's mission. DPP continues to maintain a steady case production while at the same time ensuring quality preparation for the committee. Thank you. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Marianne Wolf, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, for those of you who know that I'm the director at UCLA of the Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice, and part of the faculty leadership of the CSU UCLA Collaborative on Neuroscience, Diversity, and Learning. I simply want
Ms.
to,
Wolf, Miss
Yes.
Wolf, this is for agenda item 3A. Is that the item you would like to speak to?
no, this is the item on the performance assessment. Should I be
Is that
waiting?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you
we'll
so
move on.
much. Thank you.
The comment. Members of the public, we are now presenting item 3A. Divaka Sood, would you like to speak to item 3A? Chair, I don't believe we have any comments for this particular item.
Thank you. The public comment period for this item is now
Hello,
closed.
can you hear me?
I can. Are you wishing to make comment on item 3A? Okay, thank you. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Hartwig?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, Ms. Kritzofi. Thank you for this report. I really appreciate our chance every meeting to get some insight into the workload of our important third pillar of the work that this commission does, which is disciplinary work. So thank you so much for that, as always, and thank you to your team. I was curious for you just to tell us a little bit more about the difference in the cases opened in September and October. As you note in your summary, it was lower. And when we look at the cases opened in September at 203 versus last year at 597, and in October at 208 versus last year at 505, it is pretty significant in the difference. So I'm just wondering if you could shed any light on that. Is it that last year there was a big surge with post-pandemic applications, or is there any insight you can give us into why there's such a big difference there?
Thank you. I've been looking at the numbers because they are lower, and I'm trying to factor in several different pieces. The busy season right now is for our certification division. And so our busy season technically starts in January after certification is completed, the academic review of the surge of applications they're getting at the beginning of the school year. So while our numbers looked large last year, I don't have a reference to go back to yet other than more historical data, which I'm looking at because these are lower. It also seems to be in alignment with the current workload based on committee and commission's meetings. Our meetings for December for committee are generally later in the month, and because they're earlier and they were earlier in November, that causes a transition for our applications as they look like cases open. Also, oh, okay, did everybody disappear? Sorry, okay, sorry. Also, the volume of the applications coming in the door don't always result in an open case. So while we do have a large application submission, it doesn't always equal a case when it relates to DBP. If somebody discloses an infraction or discloses a case we've already reviewed or discloses information where maybe their criminal misconduct has been dismissed. It doesn't create a casework that shows as an open case in the statistic. So while we're looking at applications, it doesn't always equal a case.
Thank you. That is very helpful, both your response and, of course, I find it very reassuring to know that you anticipate the questions that I have and are looking so closely at these trends so that you can have a handle on your workload. And then I will ask the question I'd like to ask every single time, which is to check in on what your how you're feeling about your staffing. I know that you've said that you expect the workload to increase, and I know that it's critical that we keep up the excellent pace that you all have kept. So are you feeling that you have enough staff and resources to maintain the needed pace?
I do. Currently, we have 4 brand new staff that have started in the past 2 months. This creates a cycle of training for us, which allows me to focus on what they'll be able to do in the future. So as staff are picking up, for example, the initial review cases, 3 of the new staff are in that unit alone. And so as they start their training process, training process continues, they'll begin writing more and more cases for the committee of credentials at the time so that we hit our goal of 90 or more. So as we move through in our training, I expect that we'll be able to keep the same level of processing that we currently do now.
Great, thank you very much. And please convey thanks to the division for all the hard work in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do other commissioners have any questions or comments? This is an information item and no action is needed. And as always, thank you, Ms. Grisafi, for your excellent work and for your report this morning.
Thank you.
This concludes the business before the Professional Practices Committee. The committee is adjourned. Next is the Educator Preparation Committee. Commissioner Klatt, will you please reconvene the committee?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I would like to reconvene the Educator Preparation Committee. We have 4 items today. Our first item 2D, is options to study and improve California's teaching performance assessments. This item is being presented by Amy Rising and David DeGear. This is an information action item. Ms. Rising, will you please begin?
Good morning, commissioners. Happy Friday. David and I will present the item and I will begin. So this agenda item before you provides for your consideration options to study and improve California's teaching performance assessment systems. Staff acknowledges that assessment is a topic that always garners great interest, and that this item and last meeting's annual report have elicited very passionate comments across the spectrum of views. Staff also appreciates and hears how performance assessments affect teacher candidates and their paths to earning a credential. Since teaching performance assessments have come online in California, sponsors of these assessments have engaged in ongoing review and further development of each system to reflect and incorporate lessons learned. Over the last 2 years, the Commission has received 2 reports on performance assessment pass rates and hosted a study session on the role of performance assessment in teacher preparation and licensure, not only here in California, but across the country and in other countries. We have received feedback from candidates, faculty, and assessors over the last several years that have informed annual updates to the Cal TPA, reflecting the agency's commitment to continuous improvement. This item continues in this vein with recommendations related to how candidates demonstrate readiness to teach and how accreditation can help to strengthen preparation, and most importantly, support our candidates. Specifically, staff recommend that the Commission consider adopting a secondary passing standard for each version of the Cal TPA and the Ed TPA. The secondary passing standard would be targeted toward candidates who fell just short of the current adopted passing standards set for these assessments, but may have demonstrated classroom readiness through other measures at the local level and within their programs. To be clear, the recommendation is not proposing lowering the standard. Rather, it would expand the ways in which candidates could demonstrate their readiness to begin teaching as supported in statute. The secondary passing standard would allow program sponsors to recommend for preliminary credential candidates who score within a negative 1.0 standard error of measurement, or SEM, if the program sponsor has evidence from additional measures that the candidate has demonstrated competency in the 7 teaching performance expectation domains. Tables 1 through 3 in your item on page 4 indicate that if this secondary passing standard has been in place during the 21-22 and 22-23 academic years, our last 2 years, as many as perhaps 2,000 candidates could have avoided having to resubmit or retake their TPA or EdTPA if in their preparation programs provided sufficient evidence through other performance measures that candidates were in fact classroom ready. These measures could include both formative and summative local assessments that include but are not limited to observations of teaching, information gathered from supervising teachers and others who support teacher candidate development, coursework assignments, and other TPE-aligned embedded assessments. It is also important to note that the proposed negative 1.0 SEM, standard error of measurement, would not be added to the adopted passing standard of 14 points for pilot participants in the coming LPA pilot test that will take place this spring. So this SEM would not be applied on top of that score point of 14.
Ms. Rising, can you get a little closer to the mic because of the outdoor
Yes,
noise?
that's what
Thank you.
distracted me. I thought, oh, here we go. I don't know. Seems like we should write a letter to this city. Is that better? Can you hear me better now? If the commission finds merit in this proposal, it has several options to consider for the implementation of a secondary passing standard. So there are 3 options that we put in front of you. The first is the SEM could be adopted for a pilot period during second semester of this current academic year, with interested programs participating and staff returning in June of 2024, within a few months from now, with an analysis and recommendations regarding full implementation. So a pilot. The second option is that you could adopt this for all candidates and TPA scores moving forward. And the third is that it could be adopted for all candidates and TPA scores moving forward and be retroactively extended to candidates who have previously completed a TPA but not yet earned their credential. In addition to recommending adoption of a secondary passing standard, staff plan to convene a work group of education partners, teachers, administrators, mentor teachers, national board certified teachers, preparation program faculty from all segments, and performance assessment experts to review implementation of California's performance assessments. This group would also review best practices and challenges of implementation, along with issues related to reliability and scoring, complex sets of evidence of practice, including video evidence. The findings and recommendations of this work group would potentially inform policy and practice related to the implementation of teaching performance assessments in California and determination of quality and effectiveness in educator preparation programs. This group would consider all 3 currently adopted TPAs and engage with the model sponsors on how to increase and build validity and ensure reliable scoring, including how to support local scoring for interested programs, as is currently allowed by statute and the Commission's performance assessment design standards. And this would also extend to all of our performance assessment work, including the administrative performance assessment work and the early childhood performance assessment work.
Amy, maybe Maybe we should just pause for a moment. 'cause
Yes, I
they're
was just gonna
right
say, and maybe
there.
we'll pause for a
Just-
moment before I turn this over to my
Just
colleague,
for
David Gear,
a few seconds.
the
for
Director
now.
of PSD.
And yeah, just to let people know who might be on Zoom and aren't hearing what we're hearing, there's a considerable amount of noise coming from outside the building now with maintenance crews yes, and so it's very loud in here right now. So I think we'll pause for a moment.
Well, there are a lot of leaves out there.
We should wait, I think. Just kidding. Because now it's loud for us.
Pardon?
As they come around the building.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, now it's really loud.
Yes, for those who aren't in the building, we're on a corner, so they've come across one side and we're now waiting for the other side of the corner of our windows.
So we do appreciate that Sacramento likes to keep its sidewalks clean and clear and safe. And if there's anything I need to repeat, I'm happy to go backwards. I'm also happy to turn it over to my colleague, David, to carry on. Are we going to carry on, David, please?
Thank you.
Staff will also consider how to strengthen accreditation, both common and program standards, related to the implementation of TPAs. Research indicates that the level of program and faculty participation in TPA implementation and candidate support directly impacts candidate success with TPAs. Staff will review completer survey results as well as responses to a newer set of questions about the support CalTPA candidates received during their professional program preparation as defined in Program Standard 5. Accreditation staff will monitor the supports provided and compare this data to pass rates to determine how supports may be impacting pass rates. Programs whose candidates report low support and who also have low to middle pass rates will be reviewed as part of the accreditation process and offered targeted technical assistance as needed. In addition, in webinars provided to support programs using CalTPA and EdTPA, specific advice and best practices can be shared with a larger community of practice. Staff will use the above data and findings of the work group to draft changes to Common Standard 4 on continuous improvement and Teacher Preparation Program Standard 5 on supporting candidates in completing and passing a TPA to strengthen and clarify them as necessary. Finally, commission staff, in consultation with preparation program leaders, will develop a more formal process for identifying and supporting programs with lower TPA pass rates. This process could include building a program improvement plan to address the specific rubric level data that indicates low candidate performance, focus on how faculty are informed about teaching performance assessments and trained to score submissions, and consider new or different ways to support candidates in embedded performance assessment experiences as part of their clinical work. I'll turn it back to Amy.
Thank you, David. Staff recommends that the commission adopt the secondary teaching performance assessment passing standard of a -1.0 SEM, recognizing the responsibility of preparation programs to rely on TPA scores in addition to other program measures of teacher candidate readiness, administrative services candidate readiness, and develop with each candidate an individual development plan that identifies areas for further development during induction. Staff recommends that the commission choose an implementation plan for the secondary passing standard. These options are provided for consideration. The commission should adopt and could adopt applying a -1 SEM and establish a secondary passing standard for a pilot period with programs participating and ask staff to return in June with an update and a report on how the pilot was implemented. The second option is that the commission could adopt the secondary passing standard for all candidates and TPA scores moving forward. And the third is that the commission could adopt the secondary passing standard for all candidates and TPA scores moving forward and retroactively extend the secondary passing standard to candidates who have previously completed a TPA but not yet earned their credential. And the example is to go back to the start of the central scoring, which began in 2018, and then coming forward for candidates who did not qualify. Next steps would include the commission. If the commission adopts the secondary passing standard for TPAs, staff would, of course, disseminate a program sponsor alert detailing a timeline and process for implementation and hold technical assistance webinars, office hours, outreach to support implementation. And with that, I conclude our presentation and turn it back to you.
Thank you, and thank you for your, your flexibility with all of the noise. We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public who would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or clicking on the raised hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. We are going to have a 2-minute limit on public comments, so please keep your comments within that 2 minutes. And I think will we have a timer? Okay, all right. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Mandy Redfern.
Good morning, CTC commissioners. My name is Dr. Mandy Redfern, and I'm the chair of the Credentials and Professional Development Committee for CTA. I'm a 23-year veteran California educator, have served as an induction mentor and an adjunct supporting candidates through the TPA process. I would like to read a comment made by a current successful classroom teacher regarding their TPA experience. Personally, there were multiple emotional breakdowns while completing the TPA, as I had to write detailed lesson plans for my program, attend classes, meet with mentor teachers, meet with supervisors, teach a full day, and then also work part-time just so I could pay my rent. The stress and lack of money got so bad, the other teachers in the department gave me a tote full of groceries so I could at least bring lunch. CTA has offered a multitude of specific recommendations in our letter, but I'd like to draw your attention to a few. The first one, ensuring that a majority of the performance assessment workgroup members are current classroom teachers. Number two, at least half of the members of the workgroup and the commission staff who support the workgroup should be Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Number three, the work group must develop recommendations for the implementation of performance assessment requirements in accordance with the provisions found in Ed Code 44320. First, take place during the normal term and duration of the preparation program, be ongoing and blended into the preparation program, function formatively, work as part of a system of multiple measures, and allow areas of growth to be addressed by the induction program. CTA looks forward to working with the CTC and our partners to help evolve educator preparation systems as we face a teacher shortage. I want to assure you that we are committed to this important work, and I want to thank you for your service to our profession.
Aaron Giddens.
Still on? Okay. Good morning, CTC commissioners. My name is Erin Giddens. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a 5th grade classroom teacher in La Habra, representing the California Teachers Association. As highlighted by my colleague earlier, CTA appreciates the time invested by commission staff and the commissioners on this important issue. As someone who took a whole year off because of a TPA, I personally appreciate that. I'd like to share another anecdote from another teacher. I attempted the TPA during student teaching during the pandemic. I was observed 12 times during the semester, which was stressful but yielded high results because I could reflect immediately and apply new strategies in the next lesson. The TPA does not offer that same cycle of reflection. I was attempting to complete too many things, and it was very overflowing to ask me to take the TPA as well. My health suffered as well as my personal and family time. Item 2D does show progress, but it does not go far enough to bring the current implementation of the performance assessment requirement into alignment with Ed Code section 44320.2. It does not go far enough to clarify the flexibility available to program sponsors who can consider a complete picture of candidates' readiness as the basis for recommendation for the credential. While item 2D itself clarifies that the performance assessment requirement never needed to serve as a function as a high-stakes single point of denial for candidates, it does not go far enough to bring in the manner it proposes extending available flexibilities allowed by law retroactively to start centralized scoring. Our collective effort should be focused on helping educators thrive so that they in turn can help their students thrive. CTA looks forward to working with the CTC and our sponsors to evolve the educator preparation system. Thank you.
Mayuki Manzanato.
Good morning, commissioners. Yes, good morning. Is this okay? If I can't hear myself. My name is Miyuki Montanero. I'm a second grade teacher in Davis. Currently representing the California Teachers Association. I completed my teaching credential program during the onset of the pandemic, 2019-2020. CTA appreciates the responsiveness with which the commission staff has sought to address the issues raised regarding Cal TPA and Ed TPA during the last October meeting. But while this item shows progress, it does not go far enough. As my colleagues just highlighted, the plight of teacher candidates and aspiring educators. CTA trusts university faculty, supervisors, and practicing mentors to develop and support aspiring educators. We trust the evidence generated by the activities these accredited programs facilitate, whether it's the preparation coursework and assessment, the structured improvement cycles, and the training in real classrooms with practical hands-on experience to serve as the basis for program sponsors to recommend candidates for credentials. We know through our most recent survey of over 1,280 members that Ed TPA and Cal TPA are harmful, high-stakes, standardized assessments of low preparatory value that undermine the activities of high preparatory value that we see programs having candidates practice on a day-to-day basis. We have also heard clearly from teachers and from aspiring educators that the Ed TPA and Cal TPA damage the mental health and well-being of aspiring educators. While we also know the harmful consequences that disproportionately are borne by candidates of color. We thank the commissioners for your time and your leadership on this issue and look forward to helping evolve California, our state system of educator preparation to better equip teachers to bridge California's diverse students to bright futures. Thank you.
Part.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Doug Gephardt. I'm AXA's liaison to the commission here. I'm here to speak to 2D. AXA requests the CTC to clarify whether the commission will utilize the pending performance assessment work group to address the ramifications of the current structures of all performance assessments, including the California Administrative Performance Assessment. As noted in the agenda item, state statute EC 44320.2 calls for teaching performance assessment scores to be one source of data that informs the preparation program's decision to recommend a candidate for a credential. Performance assessment instruments should be one indicator of the knowledge and abilities of teacher candidates, but should not be a singular instrument that prohibits candidates from receiving their teaching authorization. AXA looks forward to participating in the work group to identify workable solutions to the existing challenges of the TPA outcomes. Thank you.
Mandy Hugh, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me? Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Mandy Hu, and I am a staff attorney for California Teachers Association. I speak today to urge the CTC to eliminate the teacher performance assessment requirement or bring it into alignment with the law. We know that California schools are struggling to find teachers and that the number of credentials awarded by the CTC has decreased this year. In this context, the TPA requirement as implemented is a burdensome, extraneous obstacle with little value that prevents aspiring candidates from becoming teachers. The TPA is not meant to prevent candidates from becoming teachers, but that is the unfortunate reality of how it is implemented. First, the TPA is supposed to be formative for use by the candidate and their instructors for the purpose of improving the candidate's teaching ability, but as implemented, the TPA is summative. It is a high-stakes pass-fail exam. Second, the TPA is supposed to be ongoing and blended into the teacher preparation program, but as implemented, the TPA is a separate, extraneous source of work solely to meet the TPA requirement that must be completed by candidates after their coursework and after student teaching. Third, the TPA is meant to be just one factor in whether a candidate is recommended for the award of a teaching credential, but as implemented, the TPA acts as an absolute gatekeeper. The candidates who do not pass it are effectively barred from recommendation for a credential. This exhausts and stresses teacher candidates, leading some of them to drop out of the profession before they've even begun. California Education Code Section 44320.2 did not envision the TPA to be implemented this way. I therefore urge the CTC to either eliminate the requirement or to bring it into alignment with the law, and to let it be known as the formative, ongoing, and flexible assessment that it was meant to be. Thank you for your time.
Public advocates, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, commissioners and staff. Angelica Salazar with Public Advocates. Thank you for responding to the calls made at the last CTC meeting to reduce the barriers associated with Cal TPA and Ed TPA. In June and October, we heard from several teachers and commissioners about the adverse impact standardized examinations and assessments have had on thousands of teacher candidates, with especially devastating harms on BIPOC teacher candidates. The reform being proposed today, adopting a secondary passing standard within one standard error of measurement with additional competency measures, is lawful and consistent with other practices approved by the courts. For example, in Public Advocates' longstanding San Francisco police force integration case, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit upheld the use of banding, plus relevant secondary criteria to determine promotions. There, the court found it lawful for the city to treat all scores within a statistically derived band based on, as here, a single standard error of measure as substantially equivalent for the purpose of measuring knowledge, skills, and abilities, and further to rely on secondary criteria to advance individual candidates for promotion. If CTC's reform is retroactive, then thousands more teacher candidates could pass their teacher performance assessments. We agree with the other comments, urging you to invite teachers, professors, and educator preparation programs and school administrators to join the performance assessment work group so that future changes are grounded in the lived experiences of our educators. We strongly recommend you also make this group representative of the rich diversity of our K-12 student population and be especially sensitive to including BIPOC and multilingual individuals. Lastly, we uplift the call made by Commissioner Davis in October to take a deep look at all examinations and assessments to align teacher preparation with effective classroom practice for student learning and eradicate all traces of racist exams in California. Thank you.
The individual calling from the number ending in 119. Please unmute your microphone or unmute your phone.
Hello, this is Liza Finkelstein. I am a mother of a dyslexic student and a former public school teacher in San Francisco Unified School District for 10 years in Hunters Point and the Mission, as well as an advocate, a literacy advocate that co-founded Fulcrum, Full and Complete Reading is a Universal Mandate. I'm calling on behalf of myself and my organization to strongly oppose CTC's proposal and to urge you not to approve item 2D, lowering the standards for teachers in learning how to teach reading. This is the single most important standard that we need to keep high, because reading, as we all know, is foundational to all other learning. And if our teachers are not held to the standard and prepared, it will very negatively impact the very students that they're going into the field to try to help. Furthermore, by lowering the standards, yes, we would in the short term promote more teachers entering the field. But as we know, when teachers are underprepared, there is high turnover, people leave the field, students are not getting served, and that leads to low morale and also students obviously not learning. So I am here to strongly urge you not to pass item 2D. Thank you.
Ruchi Rangnath, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, my name is Ruchi Agarwal Ranganath. I am Executive Director of CARE.ed, the California Alliance of Researchers for Equity in Education, and Professor in Teacher Education at the University of San Francisco. There's clear evidence through research that that performance assessments deeply impact teacher candidates and educators in the classroom across multiple components. This is detailed by the extensive survey from CTA, as well as research by my colleagues and CARE.ed members, Dr. Marisol Ruiz and Kelly Vaughn, which together surveys thousands of candidates and educators. Performance assessments have not been proven by research to produce a higher quality teacher force. They are not valid and reliable in predicting teacher quality. And most importantly, they disproportionately filter out candidates of color because of the racial gap scores between white candidates and students of color. As a teacher educator, the impact of the TPA has been devastating. Candidates are experiencing overwhelming stress, depression, and anxiety. TPA takes place from essential foundation curriculum and instruction courses. They're unable to come to class or finish assignments because of the stress. It's also deeply impacting their student teaching experience and delegitimizing their beliefs that they are capable of being teachers, even though many of them already been hired and are teaching in the classroom for years. As a teacher educator and educational researcher, I call for the immediate and permanent removal of high-stakes tests from teacher education. We are creating long-standing barriers to diversifying the teacher profession, deep harm to our candidates, and damaging teacher preparation. The research from both CARE.ed and CTA, as well as the stories of our teacher candidates, should be enough to know this needs to end now. Thank you, Commission, for your time and consideration.
McDougall, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Members of the commission staff, Steve McDougall representing CFT. I'm the president of the Division Council of Early Childhood Educators through 12th grade locals throughout the CFT land. Before I get started, Commissioner Wicks, congratulations on your rotation. Thank you for sharing your frustrations regarding the assessment you recently took with the online vendor and those challenges, because those are real. And don't forget, Salinas has educator housing and a very competitive salary schedule, and we could use you and your friends from Pepperdine up here in Salinas. Also want to apologize, CFT does have a letter. It was tardy. I can serve lunch detention if you like, but it was uploaded by staff, thank you, even though it was late. And it echoes everything that CTA and others have had to say today. So I'm not going to repeat those talking points other than to say, I personally regret that we didn't bring these issues regarding the TPAs to the Commission's attention much sooner. They have caused harm. They have barred people from the profession inappropriately, according to the education code. And we need to get these folks through whatever it is they need to get through. There are programs that are accredited, need to stand behind them. And we need to get them into classrooms as soon as possible, practically. Please. Thank you and have a great holiday, and take care, everyone. Travel safe.
Vika Sood, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Devika Sood. I was a longtime teacher in Oakland, now Director of Program with Fulcrum. Full and complete reading is a universal mandate. I am here to strongly support or strongly urge CTC not to approve the proposed item 2D. The reason being is that SB 488 is requiring universities to now refine their syllabus to include the new literacy standards. And because CTC has now eliminated a separate literacy TPA and embedded it within the TPA by eliminating this TPA completely, now we're eliminating the need for universities to now refine their syllabus to include those new literacy standards. By removing this accountability, we're removing the basic minimum threshold of knowing that teachers are coming into the classroom, understanding and having knowledge in evidence-based reading practices, and are ready to move achievement, particularly for our Black and Brown students. Please do not approve this item. Thank you.
Wolf, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello again. Forgive my precipitousness earlier. This is Marianne Wolfs, Director of the Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice, and a member of the CSU UCLA Collaborative on Neuroscience, Diversity, and Learning. I'm here as an advocate for the children. I appreciate so much what goes on in the preparation of teachers and the difficulties they face in performance assessment or any form of assessment. Nevertheless, as a consultant for all kinds of countries in Europe and Africa and this country on what makes our children most capable of reaching the potential, the number one factor is the preparation of teachers. In that context, any action by the state of California that would diminish the ability of our teachers to show their knowledge, whether it is from this performance evaluation or my own suggestion, a summative set of evaluations that would diminish the pressure only on performance, but would give us a chance to also measure that basic knowledge particular to the particular teacher. That would give both learning styles a chance to reach the potential preparation absolutely necessary for our children who are struggling. There has never been a larger crisis of reading in this state, in this country, and even around the world. To absolutely ensure that we have the highest quality of teachers means that we must, absolutely must defeat this proposal and help every teacher reach the highest standards. Thank you so much for all your work.
The individual calling in from the phone number ending in 351, please unmute your phone and share your comment.
Good morning. This is Heather Calamise on behalf of EdVoice. EdVoice is in strong opposition to CTC's proposal in Agenda Item 2D to further lower expectations that teaching credential candidates can demonstrate minimum competence and the knowledge, skills, and abilities required to pass the TPA assessment. We caution CTC to not approve this Item 2D proposal because of its significant implications to the recently enacted literacy standards legislation pursuant to SB 488. California is experiencing a significant literacy crisis, and the prospect of essentially eliminating a bare minimum threshold for beginning teachers to demonstrate that they can effectively teach literacy through a passing score on the new literacy TPA is unacceptable. EdVoice would urge the CTC to not approve this item. Again, thank you so very much.
Ruiz, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marisol Ruiz. I am a professor in the School of Education at Cal Poly Humboldt, and I wanted to share my comments. I am also the tri-chair of the Teacher Ed Caucus in California Faculty Association, and also a part of Care Ed. And I agree with the comments before, so I won't say it, but I do think that we are in a crisis of inequity and double standards, especially when it relates to the TPAs. The only students subjected to Cal TPA, RECA, Ed TPA are students who want to work in public schools. Because if you are wanting to work in private schools, you do not need to take any of these tests, right? This is a policy from the CCTC, which you can find in CL-834. So this is double standard and classes. Everybody who wants higher standards, well, you could just do your student teaching in private schools and you won't have to, and demonstrate excellence in teaching. Our public school teachers demonstrate excellence in teaching, but why can't they get a pass? A third inequity that I find is the oversight into the teacher assessment. Cal TPA, RECA, and CSETS exams are designed and managed by both the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing and Pearson, whereas Ed TPA is designed and managed by Stanford, Scale, and Pearson. The common thread is that all teacher assessments are managed by Pearson, a private for-profit corporation, where is there a third-party oversight committee separate from the above parties whom these entities can report and be accountable to. We call these exams into question. Also, we are in a study where we've tried to get data from CCTC for almost 2 years now, where we have not obtained the raw data for us to be able to assess, are these exams making a difference or not? And as you're not sharing the data with the public, we can only go on the data we've gathered with our candidates and teacher education. And they say eliminate these TPAs. They're causing more harm than good.
Ron Rapp, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Ron Rapp. I'm the legislative director for the California Faculty Association, speaking on item 2D. The CSU educates half of California's teachers, and California continues to experience a severe teacher shortage and a lack of diversity in the workforce. One of the contributing factors is the layers of assessments and their costs that prospective teachers have to bear in order to become credentialed. The research is clearer than ever. High-stakes assessments like the TPA do not improve education for students and for teachers and have already proven to widen inequities. In a recent study in the American Educational Research Journal, the authors examined the technical documentation of the TPA and raised serious concerns about scoring design, the reliability of the assessments, and the consequential impact of high-stakes decisions made about teacher candidates. The authors of the study state, in light of these findings, the Ed TPAs are currently unwarranted on technical grounds. Additionally, recent studies document how high-stakes assessments not only fail to raise teacher quality, but more problematically serve as barriers to expanding the number of diversity of quality teacher candidates at a time when California is facing a dire shortage and struggles to diversify its teaching profession. Our teacher educators recommend that the TPA be eliminated immediately. Thank you.
Sacco, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, and thank you, Jessica Sacco, on behalf of Children Now. My apologies for no written response. I've been out well, as you may be able to tell by my voice today. I'm calling in today in support of the Commission taking action on this very important item today and encourage that action to be retroactive as recommended in the staff memo. I would also like to call out that such an action will shift a great deal of responsibility for passage of this or completion of this assessment to programs as well as the Commission. We know that not all programs are created equal, and some programs will require more support than others. As the work to develop the and finalize the literacy performance assessment, I'm hopeful that the Commission will continue to reflect on this conversation and evaluate how this change in policy may impact the field overall and how that change in policy may potentially need to be applied to the literacy performance assessment if allowed by statute. And finally, I would like to indicate that Children Now stands ready to support if it finds that the Commission requires additional staffing in order to be able to support programs as they make these shifts and need to onboard all of these literacy performance assessments. And thank the Commission for its quick action in responding to the calls for a reflection on this assessment. Thank you.
Additional requests for public comment.
Thank you. And thank all the members of the public for participating and sharing your ideas. And oh wait, it looks like we do have more public comment.
Cole, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, I'm Lori DePole, Co-State Director of Decoding Dyslexia California. We strongly urge the Commission not to approve the item 2D TPA proposal, which will only serve to lower expectations for new teachers entering our classrooms and will impact literacy outcomes for our most vulnerable students, our BIPOC and students with disabilities. We are facing a literacy crisis in California. Our children, especially those from low-income families, which are disproportionately students of color, struggle with reading at grade level. Only 2 out of 10 low-income African-American students and only 3 out of 10 low-income Latinx students are on grade level for reading by 3rd grade. What you do today impacts the future SB 488 literacy TPA once the pilot is completed, and whether our teachers can demonstrate that they know how to teach literacy. We would like to remind the Commission that CTA, AXA, California Association for Bilingual Teacher Education, California Association of Latino Superintendents and Administrators, and many other organizations all supported SB 488 and recognized the need for a strong literacy TPA. Thank you.
Microphone and share your comment.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Rachel Hurd, and I am a school board member in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. My interest in this agenda item really is through the lens of the new literacy standard. And I want to first respect the comments of all the other speakers. Obviously, as a school board member, I'm very well aware of the teacher shortage, and we have goals that we take very seriously about diversifying our teaching staff as well as the rest of our staff. But I do want to caution that this feels a little bit like a bait and switch. SB 488 brought important changes to how we're going to prepare teachers to teach the students of California to be literate. It brought in important information that has been missing from teacher prep programs for a few decades. And it eliminated the RECA as a trade for this TPA. If the TPA isn't the right assessment, then we should make sure we have the right assessment. And if what it's really about is making the higher ed programs accountable to teach these literacy standards, then so be that. But I really worry that this was kind of an end run to not have any accountability in how we teach literacy standards. So I implore you to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, deal with the bigger picture at the right time. But those of us who have been working so hard to create literacy change are very concerned that we'll lose all the accountability that was brought in by 488. Thank you for listening.
I have no additional requests for public comment.
Okay. I think that the public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? I saw Commissioner Simmons with his hand up. I'm guessing there will be others after him.
Okay, my job on the commission is to represent human resources. And my job is to hire teachers and to fire teachers. I do not want any system that will increase the number of teachers I have to fire. I am not afraid of having hurdles to becoming a teacher. Teaching is hard. There's no reason why becoming a teacher isn't going to be hard. I think the issue that we have here, though, is this change going to be as strenuous or better in terms of the outcomes of the candidates that we have? If I don't believe that it is, I won't support the measure. Now, so that's where I started. Now, I have a few questions about how this would be implemented. So my first one is on retroactivity. I really like the idea that we go back to where we stopped local scoring and went towards centralized scoring. I think that's actually where we lost our way, whatever that expression is. My question, though, is what will happen for candidates who are no longer enrolled in the program that they were? I know when I used to run, I had 7 credential programs when I was at a county office, and I often would go to the table and tell the commission, "You're not the boss of me. You can't tell me that I will do things." And one of the things is, if they're not enrolled, if they aren't paying tuition, can the commission actually make them make a program, take a candidate back? So that's one question. The other question I have about retroactivity is, on what basis would the alternative measures or remediation take place? Would it be based upon the standards that were in place when they were enrolled, or would it be based upon current standards? Because to me, it would need to be based upon current standards, not upon the rules on that they were. But I don't know if that gets you into handbook rights issues. So that's a question that I have about how that works. The other thing that I have is I want to know more about what is the evidence for alternative measures and remediation. I want to know who would be responsible for it and how it would be done. So if I was a member of the BIR and I was doing an accreditation visit, what I would expect to be able to see would be who said that the alternative measure was sufficient. And I would want to look at the faculty standard and see, were they an appropriate person to do that? And then I would want to know what was the alternative measure that they used. And then I would base that upon the, standard 5. I would look at it in that basis. The other thing that I would look at as a member of the BIR is if there is a significant disparity in terms of demographic outcomes, I would want to know in terms of their equity standard, what is the program doing so that their culturally responsive andragogy, or whatever the appropriate term universities would use, is what is the program doing about it? So you talked about changing standards 4 and 5, but I also wonder whether the equity standards should also be looked at in this same light. Okay, my next question is, are score reports sufficiently granular that a program would be able to actually do an assessment and say, oh, here's the alternative measure that we would use in replacement of that section of the TPA that we think did not give a representative picture of that candidate. And I'm very interested in what you had to say about low pass rate and low support. I think that that is actually a very good way of looking at this problem. And what I'm hearing from the field is that, well, okay, I'm hearing one thing from candidates and something else from candidates, from programs. And I think that there is a mismatch in the perception of what remediation and support happens to those who don't pass the first time. So I would like to actually, and I think that the panel, that should be a question for the panel or the work group, whichever they are, because right now we're seeing two different realities, and I think that has to be arranged. And what I think is my final question is why not Fresno? Would Fresno not have the opportunity for retroactivity and for all the other stuff that we were talking about that the Ed TPA and the Cal TPA would have? Because as I look at it, Fresno is kind of a bright spot in the world of TPA because it has maintained that local and integrated buy-in. And those are my questions.
And Ms. Rising, would you like to respond to any of those now or just wait until there's been more comment, or are you just taking notes for?
I can answer the Fresno one. That's actually an easier one for us. It really would not apply to Fresno because what their requirement is that every candidate has to reach at least a score of 2 on their rubric. And because of that, you know, the number of points in their rubric, a standard error of measurement really doesn't mean anything. They've kind of set their minimum as expectation to certain criteria, and because it, you know, you're right, it is a bright spot. They've implemented it in their coursework, and that's why their pass rate is 98 to 99%. So their system just does not have the same features, or it's built very differently than the Ed TPA and the Cal TPA in terms of numbers of points where you actually statistically can look at a standard error of measure. Amy, did you want to address other?
I was just going to say we could go ahead and address David's questions, or we could see if other people have additional questions and kind of go through all of them. I'm happy to do it either way. What is your preference? I took notes. Okay, so and I am confident that you've got all of the questions, and we'll circle back, but it does look like Commissioner Brown, you had your hand raised.
Yes. I have a couple different thoughts. I appreciate Commissioner Simmons' questions. I think those are great questions to start us off with. I want to kind of just share my thinking at this moment about the notion of lowering expectations. And the way that I see this is potentially bringing it into alignment with what we have done with other assessments, in that it doesn't, to me, seem like lowering standards. It seems to me like allowing flexible means to satisfy the requirement. For example, we have different ways you can show basic skills competence now. Some are assessment-based and some are course-based, or you can mix and match, that there are multiple ways to demonstrate that you have met the standard. So I kind of see this item as bringing this particular assessment into alignment with other, with that philosophy, that there are many ways that we can demonstrate candidate proficiency. And I think that extends to the notion of literacy instruction too. you know, that I don't know that this is the only way that you can satisfy that. So I would feel comfortable in providing flexible means to demonstrate that. I do have, just if we're starting a wish list for the work group, I had some wonderings that don't need to be answered today, but I think would be interesting to find out more. I was looking at the table on page 2D4, and I was just looking at the number of candidates who pass on their first attempt, who don't pass on their first attempt, how many candidates would be within that standard error of measurement. I was just trying to see what impact should this pass, what does that mean in numbers? And I wanted to know in the future, not today, why it seems like there is a higher pass rate for cycle 2 than cycle 1. It seems like cycle 1, 26-ish candidates, I'm looking at the 22-23 data, don't pass on their first attempt, but on cycle 2, only 10% don't pass. I was just curious what the difference is between cycle 1 and cycle 2 that has such a different pass rate, because I read in the item that they can take it in any order. I don't know, just curious. And then also, I do appreciate the detail in this item, and I as a newer commissioner, I really appreciate the connection between how accreditation and assessment and preparation, the intersection between them, all of that, that helped me understand the common standards and the program standards and how they can all support having well-prepared candidates. So thank you so much.
Commissioner Brown?
Thank you for this. And I first want to thank Dr. Davis for helping bring this ongoing issue to the commission, because it is an ongoing issue. And I know that I have a little bit different take on things because I haven't been in the performance assessment world, but I have been in the teacher proficiency world. And one of the things I'd like to just offer is what I see is there's a set of knowledge that a teacher has to have and a set of skills that a teacher has to have. And they overlap, but they're not identical. We have a system that sets up for institutions of higher education to prepare teachers. And in that regard, they focus a lot on knowledge. The focus on clinical practice and skills needs to be looked at clearly. And that's where this, I'm uncomfortable calling it teacher performance, but I recognize the system does that because it sounds like it's a performance. And that's not what teaching really is. In early childhood education, we have a process that is where teachers plan, then they do, then they review. And it seems like part of this teacher performance assessment includes that with a reflection and an apply, but it's really intensely on the person who's doing the work. And what we find in early childhood education is that when that plan, do, review is done in an observed way, so you can see how somebody does something, and you either give them ongoing feedback or some kind of regular feedback, that's when they get better. That's when they improve their proficiency, rather than improving a specific written or video performance that, if it isn't just so, is somehow indication of failure. And as someone who's been in a classroom for a long, long time, I think if we, in order to support all candidates in becoming proficient, I think it's time for us to review this. I'd even suggest considering, but I don't think we can because it's in ed code, the idea that it's teachers are performers. I think they're much more than that. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yes, Executive Director Sandy.
I would just like to offer, I think, perhaps some reassurance or some clarification about the proposal that's on the table, especially as it relates to Senate Bill 488 and the literacy performance assessment. We have, as you know, commissioners, taken the implementation of Senate Bill 488 very seriously. We've adopted the most rigorous standard for teacher preparation, focused on preparation of teachers to teach reading that I've ever seen. And we've gotten some high praise for that, and it sets a very high bar for candidates and what they need to learn, and for programs, what they need to prepare teachers to learn in order for them to teach. And the teaching performance assessment itself has always been a high-level expression, assessment of your ability to take what you've learned and apply it in the context of a real classroom. That's what a performance assessment is. So we are now getting ready to pilot the literacy performance assessment in the spring. And we have set an initial passing standard for that recognizes this is the first time this assessment will be used by candidates to demonstrate their competence. Always in our history of any examination or assessment development, we apply a standard error of measure to that so that all the weight of this assessment and proving itself doesn't lie just on the candidate's back. We recognize context, we recognize that this is its first outing. So we've adopted, commissioners, an initial passing standard for the spring, and we will, before this assessment actually goes into play and becomes the real replacement for RECA, adopt the passing standards that the data we collect through pilot this year, through field testing next year, that standard represents a minimum level of competence necessary, that sits right on top of preparation that candidates have had, that we are going to certify over the next 18 months is fully addressing this very comprehensive standard. So we have here, between the standard for preparation and the performance assessment, literacy performance assessment, really what we would consider a belt and suspenders approach. We expect teacher preparation to be thorough and comprehensive in their preparation of candidates. And we expect the performance assessment to capture that at a high level that gives confidence to the commission that licenses these teachers that they've met the basic standard. The application of a -1 SEM, standard error of measurement, for all of the other performance assessment that we're doing, setting aside that we've already adopted this standard for the pilot, and we aren't asking for another -1 application of SEM for the LPA in the spring. If you followed that, then we really are, you are my people, and we're having a real connection now. But if you're getting what I mean, the opportunity here is not to lower the standard. This commission has always been interested in holding a standard that really reflects candidate readiness to teach. But we have also, in the last several years, with almost all of our examinations and assessments, been looking at multiple ways for candidates to demonstrate their competence. So this proposal from the staff is responsive to what we're learning and hearing from the field about their experience in taking this assessment in some of the worst conditions you can imagine, COVID, right? And allowing for a -1 SEM retroactively, if that's what you think is the right thing to do, so that they can demonstrate through multiple measures that they've met the standard. We're not recommending a -2 SEM or a -3 SEM, which would be to really lower the standards. We're talking about people who are a couple of points away from the passing standard, who have been fully prepared, who have been recommended by their programs. And we're not suggesting that we just take a program's word for it. What we're suggesting is that they document what other measures have been part of their comprehensive preparation in student teaching that equalize a less than perfect score. So that's the proposal we're putting in front of you, and we are very committed to making sure that programs are providing the preparation and support the candidates need in order to demonstrate this readiness to teach. And we are absolutely committed to implementing Senate Bill 488 as it's written, and without backing away. We are not proposing, as some have suggested, that we do. We are not suggesting that this move into a completely formative assessment that doesn't count. And that's not what the law actually suggests, what the law states, is that candidates will need to take an embedded performance assessment and meet the commission's performance expectation for this. So we are sitting right in the statute that enables us to do this work and looking for ways to allow candidates who've been very well prepared but need an extra push to get the remediation and support from their program they need, and to carry that into induction, where they have the opportunity to be supported, and through an IDP, individual development plan, leading into an individual learning plan for induction, to become a focal point for their continued development toward a clear credential. So that's really what this proposal is. And I just wanted to reassure you that it is not our intent to propose that you lower this standard, simply that we, we recognize the complexity of this work and the interaction between candidate performance and program preparation and support. That needs our attention right now. And so that's what this is an offering of.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Cotton.
Dr. Sandy, thank you for that. My questions really sat with SB 488, the work that we're doing around the literacy performance assessments and what's the impact of that. So thank you for clarifying that. What I'm newer to the commission. What I am listening to and learning more about is really the impact of that the centralization of these assessments. And so I feel like that's where some of this problem lies. And so in what ways could we examine, look at more deeply this idea of recoupling this performance assessment work with our thank you, it's a lot of P words, with our teacher preparation programs. And so how do we couple that work, and so that we're addressing the issue of this very summative, high stakes assessment that's not embedded. It doesn't feel very embedded into the work that our teachers are doing, our candidates are doing in preparation to become teachers.
It is our understanding that many programs have embedded and integrated the performance assessment in ways that make it a seamless part of preparation. And we have pretty high pass rates on this assessment, if you remember the data from October. And it's hard, and the conditions under which candidates have been doing it have been very hard. And there are a lot of factors that I'd love for us to take the time over the next year to tease out, like what was the quality of your clinical experience? Did you get into student teaching and immediately have your employer put you on a substitute credential so you teach while you should be learning? What kinds of conditions may have interfered with your opportunity to do this in the way it was intended? And how do we mitigate that? These are some of the questions we'd like to take up with a work group as we go. So as for the centralized scoring portion of this, we had a goal with that to move to higher reliability of scoring. Prior to the adoption of a centralized scoring platform, which means that all submissions are submitted on an online platform, assessors have been trained and calibrated to assess. They're distributed to scorers who are in the same content area, and we are watching very carefully what's happening in scoring to guard against bias, to guard against myriad other issues, and to get to a score that has a higher reliability. Why was that important? Because it sheds light on what's happening in preparation, and that was a goal. The performance assessment has the ability to show us how cohorts of candidates are doing within a program. If all of your candidates are struggling with inclusion, for instance, which is one of our performance issues and one of the issues that's assessed on this performance assessment, if all of a program's candidates are struggling with that, that focuses our mind and our accreditation process on what's going on with your preparation for inclusion. And what are you doing, and how can you shore this up? Because your candidates don't seem to be performing very well. That was part of the vision and goal. We couldn't get to those kinds of findings and discovery of patterns of performance that could inform accreditation unless we had a reliable scoring system of some kind. So the goal was to shed light into some of the dark corners, to find out what's happening and who it's happening to. We talked about this yesterday in the Title II report. Sheds light on places that we need to know about so we can, adjust as needed where we can. So that's part of the goal. The problem is, I think, that in many cases, centralized scoring did disassociate some faculty from participating as an assessor in the work. That was not the intent of this. And in fact, our standards and the statute that enable all of this allow for local scoring. We just need the local scoring to be reliable. We need the people who are scoring their candidates locally to know what the rubrics are and know how to apply them and have common definitions of what a level 3 on the rubric means and what it looks like in practice. So that level of reliability, we think, is essential. It's essential for fairness for candidates, for one thing, but it also is essential for us to see what's happening. And I think one thing we would love to do in the coming years is really strengthen that component of it. This assessment is required by statute to be embedded in preparation. And one way to embed it is to have the faculty fully involved in that and scoring and their candidates, but still leading to a place where we have some clear insight about what's happening in a program and who it's happening to. Who's getting the support they need? Are they getting the support they need? And is there anything in the assessment itself that may be enabling or constraining that? That's where we have responsibility to adjust the assessment so that it does reflect authentic classroom environments. But, and that's what we're doing. Every year we're doing that. So I may have gone a little beyond the question that you asked, but
okay, and I'll add you to the list. I have a list of folks. I'll start with Commissioner Delatorre.
Thank you, Commissioner Klatt. I just wanted a couple of points. This is for teacher readiness to enter the teaching profession. And so I'm a teacher, and I know that teachers get better as we teach over time. So an expectation should not be that when you pass this test, you're like at the pinnacle of to teach, right? It's a readiness to teach. And so we need to keep that in mind. Secondly, I was an assessor for a few years for the national board. And of course, they contracted also with Pearson because Pearson has the facilities that allow for the equitable access for all candidates throughout the nation. And so it's just convenient to have them as a vehicle. However, as an assessor, we were adamant at the national board that we scored our candidates' assessments. So there was no issue about the competency of the assessors. And I served as an assessor. And I can guarantee that for each cycle that I scored, I was thoroughly trained. It's a 1-month training. And we don't look for like a video case, for example, to be just so. The things that we looked for were, is this teacher being reflective? How is the teacher demonstrating, different things? So it isn't a horse and pony show, as many people believe. So until you've been an assessor and you've done that, I don't think you really understand quite what the assessors are doing when they get this material. Secondly, I think that the TPA can be more embedded, but because the institutions were disenfranchised, it did become a hurdle for teachers. So they were just busy, like, we'll just get it done. And it was less embedded in the program as a result. But by allowing for additional measures, it can become more embedded. And instead of a summative assessment, it would then be more formative, because then the practitioners in their programs can work with them and say, oh, you know what, I'm gathering this information as you're working on your TPA, and you're demonstrating to me that you have this. And then at the end, when they take the TPA, if they passed it, great. If they haven't, it comes back and say, oh, you know what, don't worry, because I see here in your portfolio we've gathered this, and this evidence that can then support, which is reinforcing the formative aspect of the TPA. And also because it was meant to be one measure, but it hasn't rolled out that way, I think it's very appropriate for us to take into account these recommendations. And so those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitesmith?
Thank you so much. As you all know, I represent AICCU, the independent private colleges and universities in the state. And last week, we had a meeting to kind of go over and discuss the materials for the agenda. And I first want to represent for our sector our deep gratitude for the work of the commission staff in doing this. I think that it has been thoughtful of you to consider all of the diverse perspectives on this. It's very, for some people, it's personal. For some folks, it's a reflection of their field and of their life's work. And so I appreciate the care and the consideration and the thought behind the work for this. I think also too, being a representative of the independents, we have a lot of diverse opinions about what this looks like and what it means. There is a lot of concern for, especially since many of our institutions now are emerging or are already Hispanic serving institutions and serve BIPOC communities. There is a concern about the care and preparation overall and teacher preparation for the development of pathways for more folks who represent and reflect the communities of color. I also want to represent the ideas around the benign neglect that many of our candidates are feeling, or also our community members, our Black community members, with regards to their academic progress. I know in the San Diego region where I serve as dean, the Black student population is the only subgroup that's not making incremental gains academically. And so that can only be benign neglect on our part for why that is happening. And so I, for one, was an early adopter of the TPA when I came to higher ed a little bit over 20 years ago. And I remember being the teacher, the instructor who actually implemented this into our program. And I remember how much I loved it, because not only did it held the standards by which I knew that I was preparing the best for the communities that I served, but I also felt it was an experience between myself and my students that allowed them to reflect deeply on their practice, to understand the seriousness of the charge that they had to educate our students, and to also feel proud as we began to document their improvements in their process throughout their time, in the culmination of actually turning in the work. And so it was embedded in our program. It was something that we exposed them to early on so that it wasn't a slam at the end as they did. And now that we have more technology that would allow us to kind of embed the practice of reflecting, looking at other teachers' practices, having conversations, we had iterative conversations that allowed us to give feedback on other folks, which made it easier for them to give feedback on themselves. Part of the issue that I know I experienced as a person of color being onboarded into academia, right? Being onboarded into, professionalized education is the languaging, right? There's very specific languaging that we use in the field, what it indicates, what it means, and it's not intuitive. And so these are the types of unintentional biases that enter into the factor as we look at these cases that I think is the bridge that we need to solve for. And so, again, I just want to reiterate our appreciation for this deep work. I believe, for me, I would support doing a, what is it? I'm sorry, the word is slipping my mind. Yes, I know, it's the languaging, a test case, pilot. That's what I'm talking about, people. So a pilot, a work group of this, because it also too, for my diverse group of colleges and universities, the work that it would take to be able to do this, especially to do it retroactively, and then bringing up the idea about folks who are no longer enrolled in our programs. This is something we need to think through. Thank you very much.
And a lot of hands went up at once, so just I'll tell you who's up. I've got Commissioner Litt next, Commissioner Heredia, Commissioner Pavri, and Commissioner Francois. Is there, oh, and Commissioner Davis. I'll add you to the list. Okay, so Commissioner Litt.
Thank you, Commissioner Clapp. I really appreciate the public interest and public engagement on this important issue for the commission, the profession. Also want to offer my gratitude for commission staff for their work on this important and complex matter. I have a few thoughts. I've taken a few notes. First, just want to elevate that we're working hard to balance multiple important, sometimes competing priorities, all of which I think are outlined in our strategic plan. So those include advancing the education professions, advancing equity, inclusion, and diversity of the educator workforce, and ensuring competence, quality, and effectiveness of the educator workforce for the public good as well as public confidence. In my view, and I think the research supports this, performance assessments can be a valuable component of a diversified assessment portfolio. The most effective performance assessments are authentic, fair, reliable, and educative. And I think what we have is a pretty clear message that the public has raised important and legitimate concerns around these aspects of our current performance assessment, right? About its authenticity, fairness, reliability, and the educative nature of it at present. At the same time, we want to continue to assure and ensure public confidence in the quality and preparedness of California's educator workforce. So for all of those reasons combined, I personally would be comfortable providing some flexibilities around the scoring standards in conjunction with other program measures of candidate readiness and development that ensure the confidence both of the commission and the public about the educators right, that we're providing for the public good. Also strongly supportive of a working group to study the challenges and utilities, opportunities, and best practices as others have elevated in regards to assuring that any performance assessment that we're relying on and the systems that support it, again, are authentic, reliable, fair, and educative. I would note this is, again, builds on what others have offered. I do believe we lost some of the most valuable formative elements of the performance assessment system when we moved to centralized scoring. Some of the more inauthentic aspects of the current performance assessment systems have blossomed as scoring vendors have sought to enhance reliability. As one, but not the only example, is the ever-expanding handbooks and the inscrutable nature of those, which I appreciate. The vendors have been evolving in order to help strengthen their perceptions of reliability, but certainly at the expense, I think, of the educative nature of the process and the authentic nature of a performance assessment. And the work group should really take those elements seriously. Also, I just want to align myself with Executive Director Sandy's notes that taking up this issue in no way diminishes our commitment to high standards and expectations for educators in regard to literacy instruction. And we can and will continue our commitment to that effort, I won't say regardless, but in alignment with the ways that we work to evolve our performance assessment system to make it stronger and to support our overall aims and our strategic mission.
Thank you. Commissioner Heredia?
There are many things that my fellow commissioners have pointed out. So I'm going to try not to repeat and see if I can add to this. But I am going to start with the scoring. You know, one of the things you learn as a teacher is you learn to score, you learn to conduct assessments within the context of your community, within the context of your school. That is a big part of assessment. And so the centralized assessment, I understand the need for the reliability, but at the same time, when you do it at the university, you know what has been taught, you're familiar with the syllabi from the department, you're familiar with the student, you know that at one point that student got it, they demonstrated it, but for some reason they didn't demonstrate it on another day, whatever that, you know, whatever they need to demonstrate. So I remember way back, I think it was the PAC. It was that goes way back many years, where we where I was at the CSU, where we you know, we went through a lot of training and we made sure that we were truly scoring in a manner that was ethical, but yet also understood what was you know, what was being asked of the student. By scoring them in the centralized about university, we also were able to look at not only what was on the syllabi, but what was happening on the community regarding the student teaching placement, and what are we expecting, and how do we take that information into the arena of scoring. So I'm a strong supporter of bringing back the opportunity for people who you know, to do more, to move from centralized to move to more of the university kind of scoring there in that sense, for those reasons. I just think that's what we keep saying we need to do. But again, I just want to emphasize, I do understand Mary's point about, you know, the reliability there and centralizing, getting the results, but I'm tipping the other way on this thought. One other thing, I think there's one other thing here. There were comments made or offered to us regarding that, you know, looking at SB 488, get my glasses on, sorry, it might help a little bit here. How, you know, that in alignment with what we're asking for with the TPA. So I would just like to just bring that topic up and maybe have more of a discussion about that, because I know a few people requested that we really seriously look at that, especially with the, you know, the new syllabus. And I did want to say, you know, and I know this is true of faculties and many campuses, but you know, I do want to say that I think that this again brings the opportunity for faculty to come together and really look at what are we teaching and how relevant is it, and how relevant is it in the context of what we're teaching. Always with the understanding that you may not teach that particular population of students. You have to be ready to teach all students, but you know, the particular skills that they might need based on their where they feel like they want to be placed. And then there was one more thing here. So I have always been a strong proponent and on this commission of embedding as much as possible into the regular into the teacher ed program in terms of assessment. I voiced that strong concern for the RECA, for the CBES, for the CSET. I still hold that belief. I think that when you add on, and I've seen it not only as a professor, I saw it, I'm seeing it now as a school board member, of someone where we look at who's the students that are coming into the credential program, where we look at the teachers that we hire because of a shortage of teachers. and their experiences and how school districts are now assuming that responsibility to try to help because they want to retain these teachers in their district. They don't want to lose them, but at the same time, they're not the institution that granted the degree nor the credential. And sometimes they are not the person to be the authority on what is expected from those assessments. So whatever way we can do in compromising and embedding more, I would support that strongly. And finally, the pilot program. So Commissioner White-Smith, I'm not sure exactly if you were referring, I like pilot programs. I think sometimes when we do things on large scale, we can mess up a whole bunch of people. But when we do them on a smaller scale, it's, and you learn to do that, right? You learn, like, let me work with a small cohort of people or a one school district or one school, and let's see how this works in different contexts. I believe that's a fair way to do it because I don't think that a cadre, a cohort, a whole bunch of students. I don't think it's fair for them to for us to experiment with them multiple years in terms of what we do, what we expect. So if that is possible in any way, any form, I would support that because I think that's a real learning experience for us, and we could refine our skills in a much better, I think, quicker as opposed to a long term. Thank you.
Commissioner Pavry.
Thank you. So I want to thank the commission staff for giving us the opportunity to really get into the details of how we revisit the TPA, the APA. I'm assuming we're including the APA. Amy, you mentioned that is part of this discussion as well. Anyway, we can revisit that specifically. We've heard passionate arguments, I think, from both sides, from our public comments, and I really appreciate that as well. And so I think the secondary passing standard is a move in the right direction. I don't know if it is the best solution, and which is the reason why I do think we would want to do a pilot. The reasons why I think it's a move in the right direction is it reduces the high-stake nature of the TPA, making it part of the candidate assessment portfolio. I think we have a lot of research evidence talking about multiple measures of assessment being the best way to assess candidates. What's also important is that this proposal allows for the professional judgment and expertise of our faculty in determining candidate competence. And not just in the localized scoring, but in the review of multiple measures of student competency. Our faculty have deep knowledge, not just of the content, but also of the context within which their candidates are teaching and learning, the students in the schools who they are teaching, the circumstances within which they are teaching. And I really do think that needs to be acknowledged and empowered, and I think this proposal is allowing for that. The multi-segmental work group is definitely, I think, a good direction. Fully support that. My fellow commissioners, I think you've raised several important questions for the work group. I would attach high priority for the work group to really look into the disparate passing scores of our students based on race and ethnicity. We really need to disaggregate that. We need to get to the bottom of that. It's pretty clear in the data that's being presented that these tests are holding back certain groups disproportionately. Of the different proposals that have been placed before us, I do have some I think the retroactive proposal, if we do identify through the pilot that this is the way to go, would be an excellent approach for our candidates, but poses a lot of very significant practical implications that we absolutely need to address before we move forward with implementation. Really, the proof of the pudding is in the implementation always. And I do want to talk about the resource implications for all of our educator preparation programs. Even of implementing this pilot, there are going to be significant workload implications in terms of time, personnel, costs that I do think need to be considered. And if we're going to go to the retroactive route, I think that will call for a much larger discussion about how our ed prep providers are going to be able to implement these programs and the retroactive evaluation. So appreciate the discussion, appreciate the questions, particularly that Commissioner Simmons raised around the retroactive granting of the secondary passing scores too, and look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Francois?
Thank you, Commissioner Klatt. Good morning, everyone. I too want to echo appreciation and gratitude for the engagement around this really important agenda item. And I'm sorry, something just popped up. And the staff's preparation for this agenda item. I don't want to repeat what folks have already contributed to the conversation. It sounds to me like there's a lot of agreement around this table. And like Commissioner Heredia, this is reminiscent for me of the early days of PAC when we first started talking about performance assessment in California for teachers. And I just kind of want to remind everybody that we are not the same system that we were in those early days of PAC, and that we cannot think about performance assessments in the same way, because there have been a lot of other activity that the commission has engaged and elevated and lifted up to strengthen the system of preparation that the teacher performance assessment is a part of. And so if you just look at the accreditation cycle itself and all of the kind of multiple measures of program quality that has taken place in the last 10 years within teacher preparation, we see that both the structure has changed, the accountability has changed, what we're looking for has changed. And I think that this accreditation system does shed light in some of those dark corners that Mary lifted up a little bit earlier. So I think that context matters. I also think we've done a lot of work in refining and making the standards that our programs and our candidates have to demonstrate competence and quality around have changed over time too. So in my mind, it's always, while I understand originally why the performance assessment went to a high stakes place, because the context was different, I question now whether or not that should be the case. And some of the learning that we've taken, that we've noticed over time in the UC, is that we can embed everything, and we've always done this teacher preparation. We can embed the dimensions of TPA into our teacher preparation program. But when you put the high stakes nature, you overlay it with high stakes accountability, even as it's embedded, it's disjointed too from the authentic, organic experience of the learning to become a teacher cycle. And so I hear Commissioner Pavri about the implications of going back to, say, local scoring, right? What we did when we did centralized scoring is that we put the cost of localized scoring into the hands of, on the backs of aspiring teachers. They had to pay for centralized scoring. Now what we're doing is we're putting it back in teacher preparation program. So teacher preparation programs are gonna have to pay for localized scoring. We've got to figure this out because these unfunded mandates, which I am supporting at this point, by the way, have to be figured out because teacher preparation program, particularly in our largest system, cannot afford the burden of the financial aspects of making a move like this, even as I support it, okay? The other thing that I wanted to say is that what we know, everything we know around the research around adult learning theory, as well as professional learning and teacher preparation is professional learning, is that context embeddedness matters. It's probably the single most important part of professional learning for adults is that it's context embedded. And so I will always support a performance assessment that's context embedded, but is also included in other measures of readiness that are local to that are local. So all of that is to say that we as a system, as an accreditation system, our accreditation system over time has really moved into taking a more multiple measures holistic approach to determine program quality. We should be doing the same thing for our candidates. We should be thinking about a more holistic, taking a more holistic look through multiple measures to determine teacher readiness for the profession. The high stakes nature of NTPA has got to stop. It's not good for the candidates. It's not good for the program. And I question whether or not it's still warranted given the improvements that we've made as a state in the state around teacher credentialing and program development.
Thank you. I have up next Commissioner Davis, then Commissioner Wicks, then Commissioner Simmons. So
I'd like to yield to Commissioner Wicks and then
okay,
take myself out of order since he is the center of this conversation.
Okay, that's appreciated. Okay, Commissioner Wicks.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you guys all for all of the information. It's very helpful and insightful to hear the multiple perspectives. And I'm grateful just to have a seat in this room and speak on behalf of the students. So in considering like both the public commentary and the research finding, I see that it's very evident, and from experience myself, it's very evident that assessments and learning practices disproportionately affect or impacts students of color and individuals with different learning abilities. And this disparity extends to our K-12 students in the classrooms. I heard a lot of talk about the literacy methods and testing our students in that regard, and of course, multiple other subjects. And it extends to higher education with my fellow peers who are engaged in these teacher education programs. And I think it's from all of these like different research and the commentary, the systems that our current policies have been practiced in education and other institutions were obviously built to benefit one group over another. And I believe it is necessary, and it's very awesome that we're continuing to have these conversations to ensure that we are supporting and properly preparing teacher education students, which it seems like as this conversation has been going on, it seems like everyone has the mission, the same goal, which is to better the teacher education experience. And I believe that we should continue to examine these existing systems to ensure that we see equitable access and opportunities for our student teachers while actively working to prevent burnout and additional stressors. Especially given that student teachers are already navigating with so many demands, completing the CSETs, the CBEST, and also balancing academic studies, student teaching responsibilities, and in most cases, I know for myself and many of my other friends, employment, extracurricular commitments, it's just a lot of things that we're juggling. And it's apparent that these assessments are adding on a significant load. So offering alternative methods to ensure the preparedness of our student teachers, I believe is a step in the right direction. And I'm really happy to hear these conversations continue. So I hope that as we continue to talk about this, we aren't just shutting down the idea that, you know, we'll just keep it how it is and we'll just continue thinking of ways we can make this better for all of our students. So some questions I had just looking over what we're discussing right now is I want someone to clarify whether the second option would be exclusively available for students who do not pass the initial assessment, or will it be an alternative option from the outset, allowing candidates to choose between the existing tasks of the TPA and the new assessment. And I'm beginning my first assignment or like assessment within the TPA. So the process and the timeline is I'm not too familiar with. So if this is offered for students who do not pass, how long will the students have to wait to receive their scores? And will there be a deadline to complete the second alternative? Again, as we've been discussing, it's already a long and lengthy process to become this teacher. And I'm just curious on how this will have an effect on student teachers once they're in their final semester and final parts of their TPA. Thank you.
Thank you. We very much appreciate your unique perspective in this conversation right now. So thank you. Commissioner Davis, did you want to?
The only thing I would say is that we require a 2-week turnaround. Is that correct, Amy? 3-week turnaround for scores.
The scoring for the Cal TPA takes place every month of the year. So you can complete and submit at any time. And scoring windows are held every month of the year. And once the scoring window closes, results are returned to candidates, programs, and the commission within 3 weeks.
So can I just ask a clarifying question, Student Liaison Wicks? I think that option 2, if I understood your question correctly, I think you were wondering if there was an alternative assessment that could be chosen by candidates, and that's not what this proposal is. There are 3 adopted performance assessments that have been approved by the commission: the Cal TPA, the Ed TPA, and Cal State Fresno's performance assessments. So you are still going to be limited. All candidates are still limited to an assessment that has been approved by the commission. What this item anticipates is allowing candidates who score below the passing standard within 1 standard error of measure, which means they're close but not quite there, to get remediation support and have their program identify any other evidence that suggests your readiness to teach and recommend you for a credential. So it would be on one of the existing instruments.
Commissioner Davis?
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to first personally thank the staff and the staff working on this particular item, and also the staff of the commission in general, because it takes a lot of courage to put forth these proposals for the type of public scrutiny that we have witnessed today. And it hasn't necessarily been a negative conversation. I think it's been a very productive conversation, but it does take a little bit of courage to do that. So I thank you for that and all of the work that you all have done on this. For our public commenters, those of us in the gallery today and those of us by telephonic appearance, thank you for your courage, stepping up and lending your voice to this very, very important issue. And commissioners, thank you for this very robust conversation. I appreciate it. And I'm going to go over some things that I think I've heard. I want to make sure that I heard them correctly, but also give kudos to and uplift some of the comments that I've heard. I'm going to start with what Commissioner Pavri and Heredia discussed about piloting the -1 SEM. And I want to bring the conversation kind of back to the center of what we're doing. We're supposed to be centering disparate groups of people and not tests here. And in this conversation, while it's been great and productive about a test or about performance assessments, it hasn't been about the people affected by this -1 SEM. So I'm going to say you can't undo bias and racism on a small scale. You just can't. So saying that there should be a pilot of sorts for this is dismissive of the groups that it's disproportionately affecting. And I know it wasn't intended to be that way, but I'm just bringing light to that. We've been focusing on an assessment. We haven't been focusing on people. And I think people are the center of what we do here. We teach children, and in this conversation, we're talking about preparing adults. So other students, people. And so we just need to keep our minds wrapped around that as we talk about what would be appropriate for the people who are educating other people to be productive citizens here in the state of California. I also want to give levity and support to Dr. Litt's comments about our performance assessments being reliable, performative, and educative. But I want to add that they should also be equitable. And this is the area where our assessments currently are the weakest. It's not the assessment itself that is weak. It is not the preparation programs that are weak. It is the equitability of these measures and how they disproportionately affect groups of people. That is the weakness. So there's a great opportunity here for small but previously thought of as insignificant groups of candidates to, with item 4D, to be able to have an opportunity to be amongst the ranks of our teaching force. Commissioner Delatorre said, since this is modeled after the national board, you know, and him having been a previous assessor, which I'm still jealous of, by the way, and this is a question for staff and perhaps for our vendor, Pearson, do our assessors go through as rigorous training when they are to prepare them before they are assessing our not assessing our candidates, excuse me, but actually looking at our candidates' materials and assessing whether they are prepared to be teachers. And I'm wondering if it's similar in preparation or maybe a little less preparation or a little more preparation, and how that looks, and if it's modeled after the national board, since the TPAs, well, are modeled after the national board format, if you didn't know that, with the components. So just, that's one of many questions. I'm going to be like David today. Thank you, Commissioner Simmons, for leading this pathway of questions upon questions upon questions. And then I had several questions. First, our prescriptive support path, is it going to be prescriptive, or if it's going to be standardized, or is it going to be localized? And I'll lend a little more opinion about that. When you standardize something, there's a huge opportunity for implicit bias. When you localize something, there's a huge opportunity for implicit bias, because not only do you get a blind read when you do it on a larger scale, when you do it on a smaller scale, you actually get to see the person that, and again, we're centering this around people, you get to see the people that may be beneficiaries of this remediation that we've been talking about around the table. And to Commissioner Simmons's point before about money, and there was money involved in one of your questions, we talk about internship dollars. I know that, and this is related but unrelated to the item, but I'm going to say it in general, that if I'm a teacher candidate in an internship, how much money I get from the grant that has been granted to that district to support that candidate varies widely from place to place. So the district could be pocketing lots of money or using it for other things and giving teacher candidates, for example, as I've heard, a $5,000 stipend rather than the whole $20,000. And so when one of our very brave souls who came to give a presentation at our table here said that there was a teacher who had a part-time job, an internship, night school essentially at the preparing university, then had to teach all day, had to visit with a supervisor, had to visit with an admin at the school. And then there was a university supervisor perhaps that came into that scenario at the same time. I've personally experienced all of that. So that there it is. And it is very hard to persist under those circumstances. So wondering if there could be some discussion, if there is a group, about internship dollars and how much money districts can abscond with and how much they should be giving our education candidates of that money. The other thing I want to say, to speak to Executive Director Sandy's comments, and I appreciate them, I want to say this very, 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 very clearly. SB 488 has nothing to do with this conversation. And I just want to say that to our brave souls who called in and support of the education for their neurodiverse and perhaps disabled children and students that they advocate for, that this does not affect that literacy requirement that we're going to be talking about in another item. So thank you for that clarification, but I wanted it to be very clear because, you know, like you said, you got to follow the conversation with the teacher jargon, but that SB 488 is totally different. The other thing that I wondered for staff was in the item on page 5, in the graph, in the chart, are we talking about unduplicated candidates? Are we talking about the same candidates in that chart where the people who took the exam the first time and then the second time, are we talking about the same folks who had to take it a couple of different times? Are they all considered in the numbers, or are those unduplicated groups of people who are taking it? And not necessarily that you have to answer the question now, but just wonderings for the future if those populations are represented separately or together as a group. And then I want to close with something wonderful that Commissioner White-Smith said, and I appreciate it. She talked about benign neglect. I've never exactly thought about kind of the context of our conversations as benign neglect, but I want to posit maybe malignant neglect. And I'll explain, because we've been aware of it for our entire lifetimes. And thank you, Commissioner Francois, for talking about our life's work. But for our whole life's work and our whole lifetimes, especially if we're in this, I want to say this skin suit that I wear, that I've been aware of the racism and the disparities the whole time I've been in education, as a student and then as an educator. But we've got to, as a group, stop referring to small data groups as insignificant and negligible. We have got to stop talking about when we look at graphs and data, the BIPOC people, the little blip at the bottom, because they're such small numbers. They are significant, they are strong, but they are small. And changing that thinking will help focus this conversation, I think, a lot more. And I'm glad in this particular conversation today that there's a public acknowledgement of significant groups of BIPOC professionals in our workforce. And I thank you all for listening.
Yeah, and Ms. Rosen, was there anything you wanted to comment on or respond to with that, or do you want to continue to save it all for the end?
We have a lot of questions
Okay.
on our list. I completely appreciate this just very engaging conversation, and we're keeping track. We're trying to keep track of all the questions.
And there's still a few more people.
And there are
on
a
the
few more
list.
to speak.
There are still a few.
I would love to hear more, and then we'll try and put the common questions together. And of course, they may produce more questions, and we will have a great and robust conversation. So I would say let's keep going, if you don't mind, and then
I think we're getting close.
We'll come back. Okay, we're here.
Okay.
We're here for you.
So I have Commissioner Simmons and Chair Grano-Shire. Okay. Oh, and Commissioner Cruz. Thank you. So we'll go, I think, Chair Grano-Shire, did you want to be at the end of that list? Okay. Okay. So we'll go Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner Cruz, and then the chair.
Okay, I want to talk about budgets because I'm crass, and I also want to talk about the idea of a pilot. Okay, as somebody who ran programs for many years, I do not want us to be put in position, because you've already got your annual budgets approved. We don't want to create systems that would put an undue burden on programs. But so when we talk about things like local scoring, that's really not up for a vote today. What we're talking about today is, are we going to do the -1 SEM. That shouldn't be an extra expense if we're talking about your current students. So with regard to your current students, already the process is that you are to provide remediation after a failed test. So the way I would see this rolling out is, and one of the programs I talked to last week talked about how that they have like a Thursday session where that they have the people who didn't pass, they break them up into groups according to which section of the TPA was problematic. They give them support, and then they resubmit the entire document. So the way I would see this rolling out is it would be exactly the same, except for a person who meets the faculty standard based upon and program standard based upon their role would then sign off that the remediation had occurred. It would not necessarily, so there's no added expense to programs except for you don't have to have a resubmission. So I think what we're talking about should not be a undue cost burden on programs. Now, I do think that has to be part of a larger conversation as we shift back to local scoring. So in terms of, okay, now, in terms of budgeting, sorry, in terms of pilot programs, I really don't think we should pilot. I think that as if all of the questions that we have asked are adequately addressed, I really think it should be for everyone. And because if we had done this maybe a year ago, I think a pilot might have been a good idea. But I think where we are now is it's really a fairly modest proposal where we are saying that programs will have the ability to remediate and sign off, or to assign an additional alternative measure for each of the things that they have been already gathering data on. So I think I would not be in favor of a pilot. I would want to say all programs have the flexibility necessary to do this. I think, though, I do, before I talk about the retroactivity, I do want to get more information on that, because it may be that we, because I could see that potentially, whatever it is we agree to, could impact current budgets. So that's where I am with that. And then I'll.
Okay, Commissioner Cruz.
Yes, thank you. As I appreciate the comments that have already been made, so I won't repeat those. But as a representative of the administrators in California, I want to, as I did last time, make sure that, as we've been focused on the TPA, but ensuring that we're also considering the Cal APA. And I know that I think you had mentioned that when the noise was going on. So I just want to make sure that I put that out there. As a superintendent, I appreciate the discussion and the focus on ensuring that we are minimally preparing teachers for their first year in the classroom. I echo Commissioner Simmons in regards to wanting to make sure that we're attracting and hiring and retaining teachers so that they become the exceptional educators in their career that are going to prepare our students, and eventually also maybe be administrators as well. And so only if they are successful and we retain them will we be able to have them serve in the various capacities in our educational system to make sure that our students are being prepared. So I just want to make sure that we think about balancing that, and I think we've heard that we're not lowering the standards, that we are looking at ways in which we provide multiple ways to ensure that the candidates are prepared minimally for their first year in the classroom, and that they have the skill sets to persevere past their first year, because that is the hardest year for all educators. I remember that myself, and so persevering through that first year is key, so that they become successful educators. The one question I do have in regards to the ILP, and thinking about this is already sort of in place, so it wouldn't be additional work. My question would be, would the candidates be required to enter induction in their first year, because it is not required right now? You're just required to complete it within your within the 5 years of your preliminary credentials. So I know in some cases, some candidates do not enter induction in their first year. And so just a question in regards to whether that would be something that would be recommended. And then completely supportive of the work group, and thinking about big changes require thoughtfulness, data, and so wanting to make sure that the work group has an opportunity to look at all the performance assessments that we have, and thinking about what barriers, what opportunities we have to improve the system, right? We should be about improving our systems to make sure that our candidates are meeting the minimum expectations. And so I didn't see that in the next steps as indicating that, even though it's in the body of the agenda item, that the work group would be convened. And so I just would like for a follow-up at a later meeting in regards to the actual composition of the work group, the timeline in which they'll be considering the various potential changes, and then reporting back to the commission on that as well, so that we make sure that it keeps going. Because sometimes we can talk about the problem over and over and over, and we never get to an actual recommendations and solutions that we can implement. So I am supportive of a pilot, in the sense of, I think Commissioner Simmons said, of everybody, and not necessarily a small group, and that information from the pilot obviously would be important data for the work group to consider as they're looking at the various potential recommendations that they may come up with. So and then reporting that as the agenda item indicates later on, in regards to what did we see, what didn't we actually think about at this time, right? Because it's always that Monday night quarterbacking is always important, because we think that we've checked all the boxes, and then we realize that we didn't. So especially around the budget. So I appreciate the conversation, and look forward to continuing this work, because this is important work. We're talking about the adults that we put in front of our students, and that we entrust to making sure that they're educating them in the ways that we believe they should.
Thank you. Commissioner White-Smith?
Based on the conversation that we've just had, I think I agree with you that, Commissioner Simmons, that it would be budget neutral to move forward and pass this. It would also provide pathways for folks who would have been dinged otherwise, an opportunity and a pathway to go on and realize their dreams. So I'm not a voting member, but I would be in favor of the commission moving forward and doing that. I'm wondering about the retroactive part of this, because I think it does raise some questions about how to get that done and the supports. And I think it would require funding for those folks to be brought back into the fold, and have supports put in place for them. So that would still be my only outstanding question. So, but in light of what we've had conversations about, I think it is the most equitable way to forgo a pilot and to just pass it in total.
Chair Grinoshire?
Well, my goodness. Let me begin with gratitude for the staff and for our colleagues and for all of you for this really thoughtful and heartfelt conversation. My mind is just buzzing with everything I have heard, so I can't imagine poor Amy and David who have prepared this item for us. So as we have always done around this table, we listen, we analyze, we reflect, we act in the best interest of those students and those educators that we are committed to serving well, and our strategic plan emphasizes the nature of our continuous improvement, and that was on display today in such an amazing way. I was ready to make a motion, but the last couple minutes have given me pause, and I'm wondering if the body would like to ask staff to come back in February with what you've heard and to make some recommendations. I'm hearing support for item C. I'm hearing support, lots of support for the work group. And so I don't want to not get going on that work group, because hang on a second, Michael, because I think that work group is really going to help inform what we do. But I don't know if the commission is ready to approve the next step, but I'll see what people, because I see people are having hands up. Michael, and then David, and then Chris. I'm sorry, commissioners. Davis.
Thank you. My only worry is by delaying it further, how does that impact? I mean, how long can we wait before it impacts the, you know what I'm asking?
Yeah.
So, because I think that we are in agreement enough today where I believe we can make a recommendation and motion that would be favorable for this coming year, because the sooner we can start helping teachers into the classroom, then the sooner students get serviced. So, do you have an answer? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes. And one way the commission could go with this is to make it effective back to July 1, 2023, so that it's covering this academic year. So that would provide programs an opportunity to figure out what would it look like to look back retrospectively, but only have one semester's worth of candidates who are recent in memory. And then we could come back later with how we would recommend it be implemented for candidates prior to this academic year.
I think Commissioner Simmons and then Commissioner Davis.
Okay, I think I'm ready to make a motion, if that's okay, or should I wait till after Chris? Okay. Okay, because I think that we don't need a motion for a work group. I think we have consistent direction to move forward with that, that it be a representative body, that it include those who have both been assessors and that have been in all of that. So I think that we're all clear on. What I think I would like to move is that we go forward with the -1 SEM that can be done through alternative measures or through a remediation. That would be through alternative measures. that programs are able to do that based upon current standards in each of the programs, that the people who sign off on that multiple measure or alternative measure or remediation are certified within the program according to their role. By that I mean, if you're a cooperating teacher, you've got a clear credential, you've been in there 3 years experience, whatever the requirements are for that program, that the person meets the requirements of their role, and that it be retroactive to 2018, but that that programs only be responsible as a mandate for current students. I think that would give a program flexibility so that if they wanted to serve past students, that is ones from 2018 who are no longer enrolled, that they would be able to serve them if the student wanted to re-enroll. And we may later on want to talk about what are the issues for maybe making it a requirement. But I think that just in terms of let's getting started, let's deal with it's a mandate for current students, and that it's a possibility, a program has the flexibility to do that for past students. Is that splitting the baby sufficiently? Okay, so is that motion, is that not the baby splitting, which is is that motion clear, Amy?
It was a good try.
Okay.
I think what I hear you saying is that you'd like to move option 3, retroactive back to 2018, and that you would like it based on current standards, and that you would like the prior candidates to not be a mandated responsibility for programs to remediate, but an option for the candidate to seek that from their program and move forward. Is that
that's basically it? Because I understand from a program's perspective, if the person is no longer enrolled, how do they provide those services? But if I was a program, I might create a 1-unit class where I would let them re-enroll, but that would be up to the program. I think that they do have a responsibility, they're current students, and I think we can do that without a whole lot more, without another meeting, without waiting for another meeting.
So there's a motion on the table. Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Commissioner De La Torre. So we have a motion and a second. So discussion. Oh, okay. I saw, I think a lot of, okay. I think I saw Commissioner Heredia, Commissioner Whitesmith, Commissioner Cotton, and Commissioner Davis too. Are you on that list? You were for, I apologize. I was taking a lot of notes on that motion, and so Commissioner Davis, you're next. Okay.
I wanted to clarify from my comments before to staff that when I spoke of teacher internships, I misspoke. I meant to speak of residency programs. Okay, thank you. I appreciate reading my mind. It's very small, and there's not enough room for people to be in there with me. But yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, so Commissioner Heredia.
I just want to get clarification on Commissioner Simmons' motion to reach back as far as 2018. So when you say that, budget just starts in big neon letters comes before my eyes on that. So I'm thinking universities, the cost of doing that. But that's what you are recommending, that it won't be mandatory, but they would have to find a means of contacting all of their students since 2018.
Okay, what I mean is that they would be able to find a means of contacting their students from 2018 if they so chose.
If they so chose.
They're
Yeah,
mandated
those
for
are-
current students.
Those are very,
But I want to give them flexibility for those prior candidates, but I would like a mandate for current candidates.
thank you. So we don't have time to probably engage in another long conversation about 2018. I would support 2018. I'm just extremely cautious. If I'm a dean or a chair and all of a sudden now I've got, gather everybody to contact students. And if they so choose to contact the students, that right there sets up an issue of equity. Because if you so choose, university, to do this, so that's just my comment. I'm not asking you to revise it or anything. I'm just saying that's alarming to me.
And it looks like I have Commissioner White Smith, Commissioner Davis, Commissioner De La Torre, and Commissioner Pavre. No? Oh, no? Okay. Oh, Commissioner Cotton, you were on the, I'm sorry, you are on my list. Sorry. So I think the order was Commissioner White Smith, Commissioner Cotton, Commissioner Davis, not Commissioner De La Torre, and Commissioner Pavre. I think I've got it. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Okay. Well, this may be a conversation for the work group, but I come with solutions or suggestions. If we were going to say, contact all of the folks from 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022, in that regard, the testing company has a great list of folks who did not pass, so they could send a letter, and so could the commission, to let folks know, hey, things have changed and this could be a pathway for you if you're still interested. And also, we could ferret out that remediation through an induction process or a mentorship process within the LEA if this person became a teaching candidate. I mean, these are just possibilities without stretching someone's budget thin at a preparing institution. So just some food for thought.
Thank you. Commissioner White Smith.
So again, as I mentioned, I appreciate what we're attempting to do here, and I do think the retroactive to 2018 being optional, as much as I would, I represent the privates and I am a dean, so the budget thing is a real thing, but I would not feel good about it being optional. And so I would suggest that we either go all in or we don't go retroactive. And so either way, I'm committed to figuring it out. For the privates, because we're not an actual coordinated collective, like a system like the UCs or like the CSUs, I think it would take a lot of effort, but I feel that it's an opportunity for us to develop some sort of collaboration or a collaborative that provides, and I would love to connect with my colleagues. I think one, we're going to need guidance on what are the types of options and opportunities to look at and examine as alternatives. And so what I don't want to get into is if I go to University A, they're going to look at other things and accept things differently and in my favor than University B. I don't want us to get into the teacher ed Olympics. So I think if we collaborate and coordinate on that and provide some sort of guidance for all institutions on these are the potential possibilities in that universe, I think that would help us in this. I also think for the privates, an opportunity for us to be kind of innovative ourselves. Many of us have extended education programs where we offer certificate programs and professional development programs at a much more discounted rate than our actual tuition rate. And so perhaps an exploration of that is, and I'm saying this for my colleagues out there that are watching right now, this is something that we might need to explore with regards to following up with our students retroactively as opposed to having them pay tuition.
Commissioner Cotton, I think Commissioner Simmons wants to say something about his motion, but you are next. So, okay, thank you.
I just want to say that I would be, if Michael is willing, I would be willing to accept a friendly amendment. That's it.
I'm willing.
Okay, so the openness to a friendly amendment is out there, but Commissioner Cotton, you are next.
I'm not offering a friendly amendment, but I'm glad that you're open to a friendly amendment. I just wanted to echo the concerns around equity. And I want us to slow down. I don't think that we need to do this on a fast track. I think that if we're looking at addressing those folks this year who are being impacted, we absolutely should do that, but we need to think through the implications of the next steps. That's my recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Padre.
Thank you. I just, again, I'm in full support of and I would still go back to pilot, but for current students, and maybe we use a semester timeline or a quarter timeline rather than, calendar year timeline or a July 1 timeline, because that just helps frame who the students are that we're talking about, or let our institutions work on that with CTC. But the retroactive issue, I think, is significantly one of resources and has significant impact on equity and needs thoughtful deliberation. I would hate to see a repeat of what happened with AB 130 implementation. I think we're going to have very diverse approaches to this. And I appreciate the caution to slow down on the retroactive. Thank you.
Commissioner De La Torre.
Thank you, Commissioner Klatt. I was just wondering if it would be possible to move forward with only for for the current year, but then using that as a pilot year, if it's successful, folding in from back to 2018 as an option for those teachers that would have benefited from it, because this does have a precedent with the National Board doing something between cycle assessment when they changed this is the third cycle of assessment where they revised it. And they did offer the retroactive for certain candidates who had not met the score, but under the new revised method, they went back and they rechecked everyone, and all those candidates who would have passed using the new cycle that was adopted, they were contacted and said, congratulations, they got their email with the fireworks. They were not unhappy. So even though it was delayed, they were not unhappy. So I'm thinking not in terms of budgets or deans, but what's right for the individuals, the people, the teachers that have put themselves through this process. I think it would only be right to go back to the beginning of this and say everybody who would have benefited from this now has the option to come back. And if you're still interested, because they may have gone on to other more lucrative fields, which is very likely, but those who would still be interested would know, hey, I can come back now and have my credential. For those who are interested, not that you would have to contact everybody, but they would hear. It was just my thinking, but it just seems like that would be easier because it would be slower because it'd only be for this year, and then possibly in the following year or so at some other future point, make it retroactive because it would only be fair for all of those candidates.
Yeah. So what? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go ahead, please, Commissioner.
Just really quickly, I would, in that slowing down, I would say to do this work and to revisit. I know that there was a clause in there to revisit in June, the effectiveness or the impact, building something like that into this work as well.
All I was going to offer in support of this is that I think that that what we're not entirely clear about yet, and I think that many of our commissioners have raised it, is exactly what would count for retroactive. And I think the equity question embedded in that is that we have some clarity about what would count so that we don't have every institution doing their own thing on it. So I think it's possible for you to move option 3 and to direct us to come back to collaborate with, we're going to have to collaborate with programs to really get a sense of what constitutes evidence of, that would support your portfolio. So that we can then bring, some clarity to the commission to help you with that part and the retroactivity. Just saying.
Chair Greta-Shire, did you still?
Okay, because we have the standards 4, 5, and I've forgotten where faculty is now. We have programs that are already accredited and they understand the TPEs because that's what defines their work. I'm actually okay with letting 1,000 flowers bloom and having the BIR at each accreditation visit look and see how they're implementing it and saying that we expect, and when we when we're looking at the accreditation standard, look at how that we're going to be addressing that. But in terms of the content, I'm okay with having accredited programs make candidate-specific decisions about what constitutes an alternative measure for a student within one SEM.
So I think we still have the original motion on the floor with a second.
Can I bring back up the other thing about retroactivity? If we make it absolutely retroactive to 2018 and a program says the budget won't work, I don't know that the commission has the authority to force them to serve anybody anyway. So that's one of those you're not the boss of me situations where I think if we go back to 2018, it really doesn't hurt programs because we can't force them to provide services to people who are no longer their students anyway.
Commissioner Litt?
Again, appreciate the thoughtful conversation. A few additional notes that might be useful. The stakes here are pretty high. Getting it right is really important. We need to learn through this process and give ourselves, our programs, our candidates, the opportunities to flourish and thrive. And I don't want the enterprise to crumble by overextending ourselves and our programs in the field. So my preference, which I think is broadly reflective of sentiment here, is maybe a little bit more scaled version than the original motion, something that would be along the lines of option A, but available for all candidates during the current program year, not an option where your access to the flexibility is guided by program preference. It should be accessible for all candidates during the current program year. We would certainly bring it back to the commission by June. By then we will have had an opportunity to learn how it gets implemented. If we want to expand it to others, at that time we'll know a lot more and have a sense of how both to guide. I also don't want to overwhelm staff who will be responsible to respond to programs. So I think a little bit more available but contained option from which we could learn would probably best serve us and our interests and our constituents.
Commissioner Litt, could you put that in the form of a motion? Because
Well, first, we still have a motion on the table.
I understand. Yes, yes. Or a new motion.
Do we need to vote?
Yeah. We can vote on the existing motion and then have another
Give
one.
it a try.
So okay.
I would amend the prior motion to state essentially what's written in option A, with the amendment to what's in option A, to strike interested programs because it would be available to all candidates. And in my view, it would be current candidates. And I don't know what that means in terms of the timeline, because current is current. It wouldn't be dated at a specific. Enrolled candidates would be reasonable.
So we have an amended motion on the floor with a second. And, you have to, do you accept?
Just adding to revisit this in June so that it's not a done deal and we're finished and we move on, to revisit this in June. And although it's not required, but looking at the work group to look at retroactive and everything else that goes with the conversation.
We can actually take that as staff direction if you'd like. And the motion being to go with option A, or the proposed amendment to the motion to go with option A, to strike interested and replace it with all, and making it available to all current students. That's what I'm hearing. I'm sorry?
All enrolled
All
students.
enrolled? Okay.
And then to revisit in June, is that part of the motion?
You don't have to have that in the motion, but you
okay.
can. We'll take that as staff direction.
Okay.
But if you make it part of the motion, if you'd like, that's.
Just a question. Just for clarification, when you say all current students, is that all current credential candidates for like the next 5 years? Because current students implies, well, they're current and they're pursuing a credential and it could take up to so many years, right? I mean,
So, well, that's, I think the revisit in June maybe then should be in the motion, so it doesn't have an unbound.
But a revisit doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't apply to them in perpetuity for that span of time. Yeah.
Commissioner De La Torre?
I had a question for Commissioner Simmons. Would this be for this year only, or was your intent for it be for all candidates moving forward?
My intent was all candidates moving forward.
Then it would be option B.
Okay, I'll tell you, my preference is for option B. And I think because there are potentially budgetary impacts, I can live with removing the retroactivity. But I am comfortable with us doing what we are doing. I think that, especially with Executive Director Sandy's comments, I am comfortable we are not diminishing standards in any way. In fact, we are merely providing alternative pathways at the same or higher level. So to me, the pilot would be currently enrolled candidates moving forward. And then what we would assess would be how we look at retroactivity. And that's Ira, since Ira had the friendly amendment, I'm asking him if that would be sufficient for him.
Well, this, of course, is up to discretion of the body as a whole. I think we're really talking about the same approach. The question is whether we're framing it as a pilot or we have made a decision that this is the best action moving forward, which is harder. We of course can change our minds at any time. So nothing, nothing we decide is permanent until it is only until we change our mind. The challenge, I think, with going with B is we have to have more confidence that the move is the right one for a longer period of time, because pulling it back brings up different kinds of challenges. So I still personally prefer a version of option A because it frames it as an opportunity to learn while we're testing out all the things we don't know that we've created through this practice. I would support either motion that we're the only one on the table. but my preference would be something that's framed a little bit more cautiously.
Commissioner Khan?
And just to bring the conversation back to what we heard today through public comment, in what way are we lessening the negative impacts of the TPAs on candidates through this conversation and this decision? And it's just bringing it back to how is this impacting teacher efficacy? How is this impacting student outcomes? And so I just want to kind of shortening that process may allow us to continue to think through that. But just the things that we heard today, how are we impacting those through the decision that we will make? I just want to put that to the group.
So commissioners, what I'm hearing is the issue of time. And as I'm hearing it, I think Commissioner Litt and Commissioner Cotton are both suggesting that we move forward, but that we do it in a staged way and allow for opportunity to learn this next semester and summer. I mean, anybody who doesn't pass cycle 2 of Cal TPA will probably know that in May, and we won't be able to report on a pilot in June. But by summer, we should be able to tell you how it went and what we've learned and what the conditions for moving forward to option C might look like. So I'm hearing that where we're stuck is on the issue of time. Do we commit for good and for all, or do we commit for the next 6 months or 8 months and review, but with a clear intention to implement this policy based on what we learn in that?
Commissioner De La Torre had his hand up.
Could you turn your microphone on?
I'm sorry. So as Commissioner Litt has stated, nothing that we decide today will be permanent. We can change it at any time. So, but by implementing a pilot period, it does end for candidates at that time. And so can negatively impact other candidates who took a little bit longer that just didn't take advantage of that opening window for the pilot. If we get the data back in June and we realize, oh, you know what, it was horrible, we can just change it at that time, but not having negatively impacted other candidates who would have benefited if it turns out to be the right thing to do. So it seems to me that it would make more sense to not limit it to a pilot period, but just approve this moving forward. And then when we revisit in June, with the data from the work group and that they'll bring to us, we can make a decision to, stop it, or change it, or add the what was the part? Retroactivity. So we can make all those decisions in June. But I think that for the purpose of the candidates who would be impacted, the student teachers, because if we just make it for 1 month or 2 months, what is that period? It's an undefined period. So I think it's just easier, let's just move forward with it. And then in June, we can decide, okay, we're going to continue it or we're going to stop it, or it still is a period of time. It's not permanent.
Commissioner Brown, and then Commissioner Heredia, and then Chair Grenfell.
In the spirit of continuous improvement, I love that notion that we can revisit something and that revisiting it in the future doesn't prevent us from taking action today. I am open to whether we call it a pilot period or we don't, as long as we're committed to that notion of revisiting our decision. And I would suggest that maybe we put, like, if we decide to go with something similar in language A, I know we talked about maybe a substitute motion, changing some of the words. And so if people feel more comfortable going with that particular language, I would like to tack on the notion of our analysis and recommendations regarding full implementation, including retroactivity. I think that's important that we have that somewhere in there, that just to ensure that we come back to that concept. But I feel very comfortable with the notion that we can take action today and we can revisit it in June when we have more data. And like I said, in the spirit of continuous improvement, then maybe we'll have more information to inform how retroactivity might work so that it, however it's implemented, it's successful.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Cruz.
Can we have the original motion and second either accept the amendment, or because right now we're so what are we actually considering? So if we could just clarify that for now and then maybe continue.
My sense is that we have evolved sufficiently that I would withdraw the motion and offer a substitute motion with Michael's approval.
And I'll withdraw my second so you can make that change.
Okay. Before I move, or before perhaps the chair would have a motion, I just want to say one thing. I think that when I was a program, well, when I was 7 programs, a short-term pilot, like for 6 months, is not going to be, I'm not going to invest in that to create systems for remediation or for alternative assessment. I think that we should I stand with, we should say this going forward, this is what we're going to do, and then revisit it in June. But I also think a lot of the data that's going to be important to assess this is going to come from accreditation. And between now and June, there wouldn't be any evidence of that. So I'm fine with taking a dipstick in June, but I really think it has to be further out before that kind of assessment is meaningful. So I'll go to the chair.
Okay, and okay. And then there are a couple, I know Commissioner Heredia and Commissioner Pavre are in line to speak when you're done with your motion.
Okay, so this is what I am hearing would maybe pass. The commission adopts a secondary passing standard for all current candidate, all enrolled candidates and TPA scores moving forward. And then direction is that we come back in June and create a work group and all that other stuff. But as far as just the motion, it would be the commission adopts a secondary passing standard of -1 SEM for all enrolled candidates and TPA scores moving forward.
So there's a motion on the floor and a second. Okay, Commissioner Heredia, you had your hand up.
Just going to reiterate support again for
Can you turn your microphone on, please, Commissioner Heredia?
There it goes. I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. Just don't want to lose sight of the need to consider what is reasonable, what is necessary, and what is equitable, and moving forward in chunks, in phases, so that we don't overtask, we don't overask, and that we provide arena for candidates to, to have the opportunity to take, to revisit these the TPAs again. So that's my only caution. I just want to make sure that we do this. I don't just want to say, and I am a little uncomfortable. I understand this, sometimes you just have to make a decision and just go for it and see what happens. But I'm less inclined sometimes to do that when there is so much at stake. for, with candidates. So, and even though we can change things, we can come back. I don't want to keep coming back and changing a whole lot. I mean, I want to be very thoughtful in what we do, because I don't think that reflects, that reflects poorly upon us. So I think we just have to be, again, just cautious, move with thoughtfulness, and consideration of all those involved. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pavri.
Yeah, so I essentially what we're trying to do is turn a huge ship in a positive direction. And as Commissioner Davis reminds us, we need to keep the people who are most affected at the center of our decision making. And I wonder, even Commissioner Wicks, as you sit here and listen to this, if there is clarity of messaging to you as a student about, will this apply to you or not? And if I think as Commissioner Heredia right now said, we want to make a decision and stick with it, at least for a period of time, so that we're not constantly revisiting and sending different messages to people who are in the process of turning that ship, and those people who are on the ship, or whatever the analogy might be, to our students who are candidates they need some level of assurance as to what are the expectations for them to earn their credential. And I would just encourage us to keep that in mind as we approve and write the motion. Thanks.
Okay, Executive Director Sandy. Oh, I'm sorry, RJ, did you, Commissioner Wicks, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I would like to. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? My audio has been in and out on the Zoom.
Commissioner Pavri, do you want to
Sure.
restate the
So
question?
I'm wanting to make sure that our candidates are at the center of the decision making here in terms of the motion, and that as we make the motion, that there is clarity in messaging to our educator prep programs and in turn to our students, our candidates. And so I'm thinking that the candidates need some level of assurance as to whether or not this pilot or change applies to them or not. Because they hear about students currently it applying to, and then they suddenly are, graduating in July of the following year, and it doesn't apply to them. So I think those are the questions that I want for us to think about as we make the motion. So your thoughts?
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. I will say, just based off my experience and the experience of other students, there are so many changes within the process of receiving your credential. I mean, even just from when I came into the program, I feel like there have been like 3 or 4 different updates that happened. I think it just became like a part of the process for us. It's something that we all just accepted. However, having clarity and having, statements that come out that shows directly who it will affect. I know a lot of these motions and things that we're discussing will happen for the class of 26 or until the class of 28. So having the idea, or as quickly as possible, would of course be preferred. However, I don't want us to jump to a decision. I think it is important to continue these conversations if it will better the process for student teachers in the long run. I hope that answers your question.
Executive Director Sandy, you wanted to follow up, I think?
I just had a quick question. I think the simplicity of this motion is great. That means we can understand it. But we're talking about all enrolled candidates, and we've talked about the candidates who maybe failed in a prior year, who are within a -1 SEM, who might enroll in a 1-unit course this year and be considered part of the group of all enrolled. Is that what you're anticipating, mover and seconder, in this role, that you can get some retroactivity if programs re-enroll someone from a prior year in order for them to demonstrate?
That's what I was trying to slip in, yes.
Well, all enrolled could encompass that, but I think also in response to Student Liaison Wick's question about who would this impact, I'm wondering if this motion anticipates that as well, but bounds it by this year, for not bounded, okay, but enrolled, okay.
Until revised.
Okay, just wanted to get that clarity.
Okay, I think Commissioner Cardenas, and then I think then we will call the question.
I just wanted some clarity as well. So when we're talking about all enrolled, I could have taken this in 2018, 2019. I hear about this, and I can now enroll into a program and now qualify under this. Correct?
That's what I meant.
Wait, could you state that again? I'm sorry.
So my question was, if I was a student who took this exam, this APA in 2018, 2019, did not pass, and I now enroll into a program, and I'm within the -1 SEM, I now qualify my credential.
I believe you're currently enrolled in a program.
At most,
Well, no, in anything.
Or anything. In any course.
So Commissioner Cruz, you wanted to clarify or ask
Yeah,
a
I
clarifying
guess
question?
to the institutions of higher learning, my question would be, how practical is that actually? Is that possible? I mean, I mean, enrolling in programs and in admissions and all these, I mean, it's not an easy, like, I'm just going to go and enroll today so that I can access it. So I just want to be practical. If we're saying that this is the goal, is that even going to be an option?
Commissioner Litt, I think you had your hand up first, I think, and then Commissioner White Smith.
I think I probably won't vote for the motion as it's currently being described, partly because the language of the motion is not clear in its relationship to the preferences of some of the folks who put it forward. And I think that lack of clarity is a real problem for us in the field. I also think it undermines the potential for us to both learn and be successful as we try to advance a new approach and offer more flexibilities to candidates who've been telling us for a long time that they need and deserve it. And I really want this to be successful. So I am committed when we come back in June to explore and study the idea when we'll have had programs and candidates engaged in various ways to learn from what these flexibilities mean and how we're evaluating for those number of students that fit into this category, how we are evaluating and demonstrating that they've met the competencies that we know we want them to demonstrate before we put them out into the field. So I would strongly prefer something that's cleaner and more direct and easier to communicate. We have committed ourselves and the staff to revisiting this in June, at which time we can add some additional options, flexibilities, retroactivity, if we feel that it's deemed necessary. But I actually don't see that intention in the words of the motion. And regardless, I'd be less comfortable with it. And I think it will raise a whole host of questions around equity, access, program capacity, which we really haven't anticipated and talked through carefully today.
So I'm going to step in for a second. We've been here well over 3 hours. And so I'm going to call the question to keep it clean, but then let's take a break and then come back. The motion could pass, but if the motion doesn't pass, let's take a break and then come back, because we've been sitting here an awfully long time, and that way we can get some oxygen in our brain, move our bodies, and come back in a minute. So, recording secretary, could you please call the roll call vote?
Commissioner Hartwig, I'm sorry, could we just have the current motion restated once?
Correct. Oh, I think what I have as the motion is that we are looking at option B. The commission could adopt the secondary passing standard for all enrolled candidates and TPA scores moving forward, and we'll revisit this in June. Did I get that? That wasn't the motion? Okay, then never mind. Someone else should record the motion. I was wrong. Or someone else should repeat.
It was up to revisiting. It was going to be moving forward.
I will withdraw the motion with Michael's permission and let somebody else come up with what their motion is.
For the break.
after the break.
Does,
I'll withdraw my second.
okay, so the motion has been withdrawn, the second has been withdrawn. Let's take a 10-minute break. So be back at 11:58, please. Okay, I think we are ready to continue. So we left off without a motion. Commissioner Litt.
I'd like to make a motion and hopefully this will reflect the will of the body and maybe help us move forward. Here's what I have. The commission will adopt the secondary passing standard outlined in item 2D for candidates enrolled in an approved program moving forward.
So we have a motion on the table from Commissioner Litt. Is there a second? Oh,
Yep. The secondary passing standard outlined in item 2D, which is as you just described. The passing standard outlined is a -1 SEM with the expectation that if there is such a candidate, that programs will provide other evidence. That's what I read in the item.
so there's a motion on the table. Is that a second from Commissioner Brown? So we have a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion of the motion? So Commissioner Litt moved and Commissioner Brown seconded. Yes, Commissioner Cruz.
And I understand that we can give staff direction in regards to the work group and being able to revisit all of this at that time.
I'm seeing nods around the table. Yes. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, will the recording secretary please call the vote?
Annette Brown.
Aye.
Jose Cardenas.
Aye.
Cheryl Carlton.
Aye.
Juan Cruz.
Aye.
Christopher Davis.
Aye.
Michael De La Torre.
Aye.
Makita Quino Shire.
Aye.
Megan Gross.
Aye.
Johanna Howard.
Aye.
Susan Aradia. Bonnie Clark.
Aye.
Ira Litt.
Aye.
David Simmons.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And I think that was a lot. And then it came together so easily there at the end. So thank you, Mr. Eising and Mr. DeGeary, for all of your work on this. Thank the public also for all their input earlier today and in the written comments we received.